You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 523, our full breakdown of the episode Shadow Warrior, which is part 5 of the Ahsoka series. And I'm just going to come out and say it. I think this was probably the best Star Wars we've had since Disney has purchased Lucasfilm. And I do mean that from the bottom of my heart. I'll get into all the reasons why. This show is it'll probably be about the same length. I'm guessing about an hour and a half, honestly, to get through it. And there's a lot to digest here, a lot to discuss. I was struggling even before we came on the air to what do we want to table for Patreon? Because honestly, this could easily be a 3 to 4 hour show if we wanted to really break in and get into all the great details and some of the myth and the lore. But I think what we got at best here is Star Wars. And we got Star Wars in a very pure form. And by that, I mean pure as in George Lucas's, passing the baton to Dave Filoni, the purest essence, I think, of what Star Wars really is. And we'll get into some of there's some feedbacks. There are people that are critiquing this episode, and everybody has an opinion. We certainly can respect that. But I really struggle with some of the feedback. Some of it seems kind of petty, to be quite honest. But more on that a little bit. Someone who's not petty, though, someone who is absolutely never petty, is with me tonight, and that is Jonesy. Jonesy, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, man. I try my best not to be, exceptionally petty at the very least. How are you tonight?
I'm still on an emotional high, or maybe I'm on an emotional crash.
Yeah, you're on the backslide now.
Maybe this episode, I mean, Purge will always get me choked up. It's so funny. Lauren texted me the same thing. I don't know what it is, but every time those dang whales come out, I start getting choked up. But I think this episode evoked so many different emotions for me, all on the scale really of everything. So maybe I was just tired. I don't know. Maybe I've worked a lot this week, but there certainly was a lot here. And I'm not the only one. You look at holistically most of, Twitter and social media just in general, and I think it was a pretty emotional ride for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. It just depends on where your love for Star Wars is. I think Dave Filoni did a good job of kind of giving you things to latch onto and break your heart over, right? Or make your heart melt in some cases. So it was just, I think I'm still coming off of that, to be honest. But what did you think of this show before we get into just kind of as you were watching it last night? Were you on the same kind of emotional ride thing, or were you pretty more stoic than maybe most?
Yeah, I was probably a little more even keel about it. I wouldn't say stoic. I'm not really that kind of person, but I was pretty even keel about it. But there were definitely some areas I really, really enjoyed about this. And I think when you look at the tone and the kind of the arc that we went through in this episode specifically, it really did feel a lot like Empire Strikes Back. And I'm not comparing it with Empire Strikes Back, which is more or less like a perfect movie, of course. But when you look at kind of the arc that it went through, and we leave on this really high spirit of hope in a way, even though that some things have happened, and it didn't have near the lows that Empire does. I think we're kind of getting there with this series. But when you talk about the emotional journey, the doubt, the transformation, accepting who you are and then moving on, and to see the complete difference in Ahsoka, those things were really powerful. And I think when you talk about getting emotional about some of that, the way that Rosario Dawson delivers her kind of climactic line, I thought not only did she convey it, but it really did come across out of the screen and jump right into you. And, and seeing Anakin in kind of his various forms was really cool. It was really exciting. So I think this episode was really, really good. I know a lot of people are super excited about seeing clones and getting a little bit of Rex on screen, and getting Ariana Greenblatt as well, who actually, surprisingly enough, so the young Ahsoka, maybe people don't remember this, but she was actually young Gamora in the Avengers show. So you've seen her before, actually.
Yeah,
which is kind of cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and we'll get into more. I've got a lot of other kind of opening thoughts on how I felt and what I thought. But before we do, I know you've got some kudos and some shout outs to some very special people here.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, with our Patreon members, thank you all so much. And a hearty welcome back to Kyle Wren. We're always excited when people come back to us after a while away. So welcome back, Kyle. We're happy to have you back as part of the group with us. And of course, a special thanks over to our now part of the tribe members, Rob, Mike, Lauren, Dante, Risk, Justin, Jackson, Sharkman, Dan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh, Jacob, and Rita Reborn. And then our Delusions Granger members, Rod, CJ, Alex, and Steve. If you are curious about Patreon, I hope you would be, because it's awesome. CantinaCast.com/Patreon. We have a lot of great content out there. Last week, what did we do this past weekend? We did a thorough analysis of what to expect in this episode. So we'll see how much of that actually paid off. Actually, a couple of things, we were pretty close to the mark. One of them, a few of them actually right on the money. So that was kind of cool. Of course, we threw a lot out there. That's what sticks. So that always works. But CantinaCast.com/Patreon.
Yeah, it's a numbers game. If we throw enough crazy whack theories out there, we're bound to get something right. It's just the beauty of the show.
Exactly. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, thank you for the download. But we'd love for you to come out and join the conversation in the live stream as well on CantinaCast.com/YouTube. A special shout out over to what Lauren's got on Jedi Novel Archive. Please do go pay her a visit. She's got her latest review on the High Republic, Tales of Light and Life. Super exciting there. And also she's got part 1 from a certain point of view. This is the Return of the Jedi edition. And then even if you're a comic fan, she's even got the Yoda comic issues 7 through 10 review out there as well. So a lot of great stuff from Lauren. Be sure to go out there and support her. And of course, I did mention the live stream and these amazing people with us tonight. Steph, Music Train, Alexandra, Ronald, Jack, Sky, JJ Skywalker, Alex, Risk, Danny, Jennifer, Jeff, Qui-Gon J, 80s kid from 90s slipped in there, and Risk, hook 'em horns, buddy. Absolutely.
Yeah. If you haven't heard enough from Horns fans or Cowboys fans this week, then you just haven't lived. So
hey, it's a good week to be a Texan unless you're from A&M.
It really is, honestly.
Yeah. And so if you're out on YouTube, please consider subscribing and liking the videos. Lauren's stuff too, in particular, of course, to help us get out there and reach more people and hopefully bring more people in the conversation. One last thing, Albert, we got another review. So if you are on iTunes or Spotify or wherever, please leave us a review if you like what you're hearing and that's kind of your jam to do that. We would love to hear it. Our friend Ryan C. Showers left us a 5-star review. So thank you, Ryan. Go out there, scream with Ryan C. Showers, of course. He said, by far the greatest podcast about Star Wars out there. Albert and Jonesy are awesome. So
oh, man. Thank you, Ryan.
We appreciate it. Ryan's a good friend of the show, and we appreciate everything. So thanks, Ryan. We love you too.
Yeah. And we are still trying to get this Screen versus Star Wars show scheduled. So I know, Jonesy, you've done the homework. I'm excited to talk about it, but at some point we are going to sit down with Ryan and really compare the parallels between the Scream series, the horror movie. Yes, you heard right. The horror movies and Star Wars. And there's some really great parallels, both on screen and especially off screen. But maybe, hopefully before the end of the year, our schedules are all kind of crazy right now, but I'm excited to.
That's going to be one R-rated show.
I hope not.
It will definitely be on the Scream channel.
Well, we'll see if we can get a more family friendly version on our feed at some point. But okay, enough of the formalities. I don't know, man. I've got a lot to say on here. Let me, if you don't mind, let me take the first stab of just kind of my opening thoughts and things that I thought were like completely blew me away. Okay, so I'll start with Ahsoka the White. We're already kind of talking about it in the chat, right? It was kind of a soft confirmation, I would think. I was joking with Alex that she was more like Ahsoka the White Turkish cotton towel because of the fabric she was wearing, but nonetheless, like I think he did go through with that. Right? He committed to it, he went through it, and we got to see it. You know, at some point, maybe at the very end of the series, she's actually going to have the big cowl over her head with the staff, and we'll get Morai fly in and land on the staff or something, you know, really kind of cool and iconic in that way. Not yet, right? Baby steps. Right. She just came back from death. And I want to get into that here. I'll talk a little bit more about too in just a second. You know, getting to see the World Between Worlds in greater detail, although I don't think we really spent any time there. We'll talk about that a little bit. All right, I want to talk about the direction just quickly. So I've been I wouldn't say critical, like overly critical, but I felt like Filoni has done a pretty good job. Like he's not hit it out of the park, in my opinion.
He's still developing, I think.
He's still developing.
Yeah, behind the camera.
But in this particular episode, I feel like we saw a big jump in the progress. Like for me, it felt like it was great, but it just never, even with the stuff in Mando and the stuff that, you know, we've seen now in this, I never really saw that kind of ascension. And for me, this was the first episode that did that. What really hooked me though was that beginning 45, 47 seconds where he was giving us aerial shots and pan shots and crane shots and, focus. And I mean, there was a lot of art direction, and this is probably going to make a lot of people mad, not on our show, because I don't think anybody's going to care on our show, but I'm going to get out to social media at some point. There's a lot of Rian Johnson direction in this episode. And we know for a fact that he spent a lot of time with Rian Johnson on the set of Last Jedi. He took him under his wing, showed him all kinds of stuff, helped him, during that whole process of filming. I think this is the first episode we're seeing it. And I mean that with all sincerity. Like, there's some really good directional shots, like director shots, for the first time, I think, from Dave Filoni, that I don't think we had ever seen before. So I like the pacing too. Some people are still like, oh, it's a little slow. I think it actually worked in this episode to its advantage, because it allowed us to, we could have all taken 2 hours of Anakin and Ahsoka on screen, right? No one's gonna deny that. But with a little time that we got, prospectively, when you look at the whole episode, we really didn't have that much time with them, although it was pretty good. But I love the pacing, because it did allow us to kind of sit with these characters. It allowed us for these characters to breathe, and for us to breathe in these moments and be like immersed in these moments, which is what exactly he was going for. So I think the pacing that he has, intentional or not, really worked in his favor for this particular episode, and what he was trying to convey, narratively, with the dream sequences, or the deep dives into her memories, right? Recessed memories kind of thing. Again, I said this earlier, I guess early on, but I think this really is the best Star Wars that we've gotten from Disney so far. And I put this above the movies, as a matter of fact. When I think about Star Wars television, at least, it definitely is. It's right up there anyways. I think about a couple episodes come to mind. I know someone already said the season finale of Clone Wars, definitely up there for me. Twilight of the Apprentice is up there. Farewell and Friends from the final episode of Rebels is up there. But this is another one that I would put at that top tier of Star Wars television. And it's going to, because of all that was put into this, the amount of real thick Star Wars stuff that we love and enjoy, what makes the mythology so special to a lot of us was ingrained, embedded, baked in. And you got a cook in Dave Filoni, who's just, I'm telling you, he killed it, knocked it out of the park with this one. A couple more things. I'll talk more about the lesson when we get into the lesson kind of breakdown here. I see a lot of different theories that are out there. This is the beauty of this, is I think it's open to interpretation, right? I have my own theory about what the lesson was, and I'm like, no one's changing my mind, right? I'm going to be very clear about that. You were not going to change my mind. Like, in my head, it is, I've seen the light, right? But I could be wrong, but I'm probably not. But more on that later. The music, the Kiner brothers, like, what the heck, man? Like, I know we've gotten some pretty good stuff from them in this series so far, but a lot of
variation on some themes that were really twisted in a nice way in this episode.
Exactly that. And then like the last 15 minutes, you could just turn the music up, and it's just so emotional. Even the captions, like when you put the subtitles on, it said heroic music plays, emotional music plays. I can't remember. There was all these adjectives that we're using to describe the inspirational music plays. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was like this. It was like you were going to church. It was like Jesus Christ had risen from the grave at the very end in that last 15 minutes. And we were all at church.
We have definitely taken a turn now. Yeah.
Witnessing the rebirth of Ahsoka Tano. So music wise is all I'm saying. I'm not saying that's how I interpret that. I'm not saying that's how I looked at this episode. I'm just saying musically, that's where I felt like I was at. The chorus, the angels, everything was just kind of going. We talked about I think you mentioned the live action Rex. That was short but sweet. That's probably all we're going to get, unfortunately, but I think it was fine. And not only that, we got phase 1, Captain Rex, right? So even that's just like the cherry on top.
No, he was phase 2.
Was he phase 2? He was in phase 2. Never mind.
Yeah,
but we did get phase 1 troopers in live action, which was
a
sweet.
Surprise. Yeah.
Yeah, because more than just the quick shot that we got at the very end of the Clone Wars, that was better. I got a lot more to say. I'm going to turn it over to you, though, because I need to drink my coffee. But what do you got?
Oh, wow. It was good. The end. You said a lot.
All right, let's get into the breakdown.
Yeah. So I think overall, best Star Wars ever. Not sure I'm there with you. I actually liked the episode before this one better than this one overall. I think some people were throwing some Andor out in the comments, of course. I think there's been overall better episodes, but it was still really good. And I think for people, I think this will be the favorite for a lot of people. And I think that is totally justifiable for what their interests are. So I think just from an overall package, probably not the best in my opinion, but still really good. And again, I think I like that the lesson was subject to interpretation. I think we overthink some of it. I think, in my opinion, I think the lesson's actually fairly straightforward, fairly simple, like maybe not straightforward, but fairly simple in nature, but you can bring it into a few different directions. We have a really good conversation about this in Discord today as well. So that was a lot of fun to do. Check us out over on Discord, cantinacast.com/Discord. Anyway, so we had that. The music, you're right, was absolutely stellar. I love the variations, the leitmotif that was coming through, taking the themes that we're used to, like Duel of the Fates, and kind of turning them upside down, so to speak, in a lot of ways. We had the same kind of imagery from Ahsoka and Vader's fight in Rebels, came to light here, just kind of flipped and reversed a little bit, but very, very similar. And so you had a lot of those same themes coming across. I love Anakin's comment of, I've heard that before, right? I forgot what it was. Ahsoka, it's drawn a blank what she said specifically, but it was the same. Oh, I won't fight you. He's like, I haven't heard that before. I've heard that before. And my first reaction was not Ahsoka was the one who said it to him. It was Luke Skywalker who said it to him.
Yeah.
Which is really, I don't know why I kind of went there, because I should have just clicked that it was Ahsoka said the same thing to him a couple of times. So, but I thought Luke, and again, I was kind of curious who he was actually talking about. But again, it kind of makes sense it would be Ahsoka in this case. But
yeah,
I mean, what else? I mean, Clone Troopers were great. I think Hera actually was a bit of a standout here as well. It was really cool seeing Jason be able to have a say. Him and Chopper aren't the comedic relief. We speculated about that in our final hype show. How would they actually fit? What would it be? I'm liking how they're using Jason. Chopper, I think, is a little bit of a disappointment in the series so far. He had kind of his one shining moment. He's not the star, I get it, but he's always kind of there, and he has something kind of over the top in Rebels. But I like that Jason is allowed to have a role in everything. So I think that's really cool. And I love that we see, from Ahsoka's standpoint, I think we do finally see her become the person we know that we always wanted her to be. And for some people, I think some people say this is more like a Rebels Ahsoka. I really feel like this is more of a Clone Wars Ahsoka that we got at the end of this episode. Rebels Ahsoka was still very standoffish, very jaded, or starting to be jaded and kind of standoffish and distant from people. And I think this is more of a return to who she was before the betrayal of the Jedi to her, right? Or what she perceives as the Jedi betrayal of her, which I think is probably pretty accurate. So I really like that we started to see that. We did get Ahsoka the White, but the way they did it was actually very subtle, and I thought just kind of worked. They eased you into it. So if you didn't know what you were looking at, you were like, okay. And then I think the most important thing we got is that we have socks in canon now. Ahsoka was wearing socks. So,
was she really? I didn't catch that.
Yeah, we can add it to zippers and buttons and all the other things that really light a fire under people. So
that's gonna light a fire. Yeah.
There's
no socks in Star Wars.
Right.
Yeah. Well. Okay.
And lots more to talk about, of course, but those were kind of some of the initial highlights I kind of considered.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into the breakdown. I want to talk quickly about the title, Shadow Warrior. I don't think people are talking about this enough. And the reason I want to bring it up,
80s movie title.
It could be an 80s movie title, yeah, for sure. But you think of Shadow Warrior, and what comes to mind, and I think this is where he was going. I could be wrong, but where I think he was going with the title is, you think Shadow Warrior, it's somebody who runs around the shadows and is attacking folks and that sort of thing. And I get that. And in a lot of ways, you can say that is Ahsoka. That's kind of who she is, her character at this point. But I think it's a play on Shadow Boxer more than anything. And as a Shadow Boxer, you are constantly boxing yourself. You're fighting yourself, right? A Shadow Warrior, in the case of Ahsoka, is somebody who is at war with herself. And that was the point of this episode. We got to see the battle, literally the battles that were still raging in her. And it was Anakin who, and I want to be clear, we'll get to that here in a little bit too. I really felt it was Anakin. Anakin is the one who came to her to help her get out of this Shadow Warrior mentality mode kind of thing and get back to living, which was the whole point of the lesson in my head. So again, not a lot's been said about it. I think people are just kind of taking it at face value. Maybe it doesn't mean a whole lot, but when you think about it from that perspective, I think it makes more sense. And I actually like that. I hope that's really the case, since it is a play on Shadow Boxer.
That's how I interpret it as well. Yeah.
So we start with Cetos again. This was the Rian Johnson, Dave Filoni thing going on here. Again, 50 seconds of all those different shots that we got. I loved everything about that opening sequence, the music. It was just great establishing shots and kind of getting you in that mode, especially where we kind of left it off, right? If you pair these two together, if you were to watch them back to back, I think it probably is the right way to do it. I would love to actually do that. I hadn't thought about it until just right now, but I actually want to go back now and watch those two, cut them, splice them together, and see what kind of, how those two bridge together. But we get into the world between worlds. So we're back to the world between worlds after that. And I guess your thoughts first. It's Ahsoka versus Anakin. We spent a lot of time on the Patreon show debating, talking about whether or not these guys were actually in the world between worlds. And I guess after now that you've seen it 1, 2, 10 times, whatever it is, what's your final verdict? Where were they?
I think they were in the world between worlds. I think it still works. I think it makes sense that that's the place that they would be, because she can't just be in the water. I mean, we had debated whether she was dead or dying or not too. And I think we even took a small poll of whether she was alive, dead, or something else. And I think 3 of us landed on something else. And I think it kind of ended up being something else, right? I think this is that weird space in between. And I think that this is the landscape. It couldn't be coincidental that this is the landscape where she would go back to, because, I mean, yeah, it would be the moment she was pulled out with Vader. The last time they had the confrontation. But I think it had to be something unique for Anakin to actually come back to her in some sort of vision, if we want to call it that, or for her to actually, be in a space where she actually can transcend and have the rebirth, right? She kind of gets rebirthed twice in a way, right? One in this fashion, and then once more, literally from a Joseph Campbell thing that you had kind of forecasted before on the show last week. But I like that was here, though, because I think it gives you a lot of flexibility over the unexpected, right? Being able to, like when he carves the pathway, right? Things that you don't expect to happen, you can break reality in a lot of different ways, and you can bend it. And I was actually kind of proud of myself, because I think the ghosts of Christmas, like the Christmas spirits from A Christmas Carol, I think actually pretty well accurately described Anakin in this episode. I think it actually followed him pretty closely. So I was actually kind of pleased with that comparison. It doesn't happen very often. So, but I like that we got that Anakin that you didn't quite know what to expect. It was a little unpredictable in that way. Yeah, he's there to teach her a lesson, but the lesson is opaque. You can't quite figure it out up front as to what it is supposed to be. We know where Ahsoka needs to go, so it's not necessarily, for those who are steeped in all this stuff, you know where she needs to end up. But you're like, okay, how was Anakin going to be the one to give her there? Especially when we start going through some of these scenes in the Clone Wars. But again, it was there to reestablish who Ahsoka was in this moment for the people who hadn't seen all the content that we've been consuming for, over a decade now, decade and a half.
Yeah, yeah. I did. So I guess my thoughts is I would agree. I do think she went to the world between worlds at first. In my head, they broke away. They broke away when he slashed the ground. And from that point on, they were no longer in a world between worlds, and they were strictly in the mind, in the memories of Ahsoka. And I do feel she died. Like there are a couple things that happened in this episode that kind of reaffirm that for me, especially at the very end. And specifically when I think Jason could hear the lightsaber. So I'll put that aside. But the fact that Chopper couldn't get a life sense or like any kind of life force from her anywhere after they had done this, he'd done his scans. And then you've got Teva with going around. They were searching. They had no life signs. She had a little thing out there. Hera had that all. And that's because there was no life. There was no life force coming from her, right?
See,
and I think that's part of.
See, I disagree with that, because I think we.
Well, let me finish.
Okay.
So I think she was dead, and this really was the lesson was about: do you want to live or do you want to die? If you continue doing what you do, which is not fight, and you give up, you're going to die. And that's why he says, again, I'm surprised to see her so quick. She was in that portal. She was in the plane between the cosmic force and living force. You call it purgatory if you want to call it that, right?
Okay.
And because she made the choice to live, she was able to return to her mortal body, and that's what allowed him to find her. And if you follow the storyline, when she starts going down that path, right, of wanting to fight, that is when they start sensing her, and that's when Chopper comes in, or Chopper says you got to go to this coordinates or whatever it is. So I'll pause there, but that's where my head is in the head canon part of it all. I do feel like she did die. I do feel like it was in the world between worlds, and then all that other stuff was Anakin, because Anakin even says later on, I don't recognize this place, right? Plus, it doesn't work. The world between worlds, at least as we know, and they could have changed it, of course, but they were. the way the way it was working was different than what we saw, I think, in Star Wars Rebels. But,
Yeah, there were no portals or anything like that. So, I mean, that's a good point. And I think, yeah, I mean, it was probably just a dream sequence. Let's just throw that out there. I think you really liked that theory.
No, it's not.
So the one thing I'd challenge a little bit on some of that. I think overall, I mean, you're probably right in that regard. I do argue though that I think Jason did feel her. So when he first walks up to the edge, and Chopper isn't detecting anything a little bit later, but he walks up, he senses something out in the water. I mean, he walks up to it and is just standing there, and it looks like he's got a feeling of sorts. He can't quite define what it is, and it might take a while for it to, before he starts to hear the lightsabers. But there's something that is getting his attention, I think, at the very least. And so it could just be Ahsoka, it could just be her Force spirit, it could be the crossing of, from this plane to the next and whatever that in-between state might be, and so it might have been all of that. But I do think that he felt something in between that he kept staying there of like, okay, there's something here. I need to focus here for some reason. And again, that's why I kind of liked Jason's involvement in this, because he was kind of that catalyst of focusing and honing in. And he doesn't have the fine-tuned senses of a Jedi that Ahsoka would have maybe been able to do had she been standing there. But so maybe that's why it took a little bit longer. But so maybe she just was out in the water. She was in the water for a long time, though, because they had to come all the way down to the surface. I mean, she would have literally been in the water for minutes, if not hours, at this point, with as many sweeps as they had
I think it was probably at least a couple hours, honestly, because by the time they find her and pull her out, it's dark, right? It's a nighttime sequence when they do that. But yeah, I mean, the Force, works in mysterious ways, I guess. You could chalk it up to that. And I'm with you. Like, I definitely agree he was sensing something. The way I interpreted that scene was it was the waves at first. Sorry, I want to credit you for something else that you said. Like, I do like the way they use Jason a lot in this episode. You're 100% right. They almost use him like a tuning fork, right? Or kind of like a, I don't know, a metronome, some way to measure the Force. Like everything was kind of flowing through him as his conduit, right? Which is really great, because that kind of speaks to maybe, how powerful he is, or how just, how the potential that he has to connect with the Force and what we could possibly see later down the road should somebody train him. But going back to his initial reaction when he goes out to the water, I thought it was at first just the waves, right? Every kid's fascinated by it. He's there. And then suddenly it was kind of transitioning over to the waves. And Filoni did a really good job, or at least the audio team did a great job. There are moments when those waves are crashing, and if you listen, you can hear the lightsabers getting louder and louder and louder, right? Until they're almost blended and you can't tell which is which. Had never really considered that. I thought it was really brilliant the way they did that. But it was I guess the important thing to take away, I think, is once he got sense that there was something out there, I don't know that, again, in my head, I don't know that it was necessarily a life force more than, why am I hearing lightsabers out there in the water? And that for me was, his ability not to get into the world between worlds. I don't think it's anything like that. Right. Maybe it's a fact that we talked about the potential of Cetos itself, like that area could be very steep in the Force. It could be, what do they call it? Inflection point, right? So maybe is that what reflex point? Reflective point.
Yeah, reflex point. Yeah.
There you go. So maybe there's something in that helped amplify things, but for whatever reason, he was able to hear what was happening in the world between worlds, I don't think it's probably anything more than that. And again, I think it probably is amplified, but I think that's where I felt like he was starting to hone in on something like, what's going on? There's something out here in the water, but it's not alive. And why am I hearing this? It sounds like lightsabers. And eventually he puts those two together and, asks Ahsoka later on about the lightsabers. So,
well, I think some of it is that he was actually just listening, right? So again, it goes back to Kanan's lesson in Rebels to Ezra. You just have to listen. He tells Hera to listen. We saw Ahsoka the way I interpreted it, the very first episode, she has to listen to get the pillars to align so she can find the map in the first place.
Yep.
And so he just took the time in order to have that patience and reach out and listen. So it actually, while it wasn't exactly how Kanan would have done things, because he would have closed his eyes, been very dramatic and everything, it was still very Kanan-esque of anything that that lineage, right, that comes through of a little bit of that patient, like maybe older Kanan a little bit here, that patience that comes through pausing and listening and just focusing and allowing yourself to let it in rather than trying to always go and find something all the time, which I think is maybe a bit of a lesson for Ahsoka in some ways as well.
Yeah.
But it was interesting that Hera could hear the lightsabers after a while. And
hold that thought, because
right.
that's lit a fire under some people. And I got some thoughts on that as well. Let's see. So getting back to, I guess, I kind of where we are on the timeline, we kind of skipped over Hu Yang, which I thought was a great moment for him, by the way. I just want to kind of call that out. The way they did the little eye slots, they made him like really droopy, like he had been sitting there mourning, and he made that comment about they never listen, right? And you immediately think, okay, he could be talking about the Jedi as a whole, right? They never listen. I think he was probably specifically talking about those two and, past quarrels that they had on previous missions, some of that animosity that had built up prior to this particular episode. But I did love that scene with him. We've got a really great range of emotions from a droid again, and credit to David Tennant for that, because I think he does a massively brilliant job as Hu Yang, especially in the series.
It was great to hear the emotion from him, that he really was disappointed in them, but also just deeply saddened that for some reason they just cannot seem to get over that hump. And then they paid the ultimate, well, what he at least believes is the ultimate price at that point, or at least he's kind of resolving himself to that. So, but you're right, David Tennant is actually knocking this out of the park, because even in this episode, he goes back to being that deadpan. Could you teach me how to build a lightsaber? No. He just goes back to just straight answers with Jason, which was fantastic.
Yeah. On David Tennant and Hu Yang, the way when he said they never listen, I want to just make it clear, like he's calling back to the whole don't separate, right? And we talked about this. They did exactly the first thing that he told them not to do. They separated, and
2 minutes later they're gone. Yeah,
they're gone. Right, the helmet's there. They can't find any trace of them, and so that's kind of what he's reflecting on here. Okay, I want to get back to the World Between Worlds. That first interaction with Ahsoka and Anakin Skywalker. Let's talk about the CGI. I don't know what they did. I was a little worried when we got that final shot, right, on part 4, but holy bananas. Like, it was great all throughout. Like, it was so freaking good. Like, I was almost anticipating that it was going to pull me out, and my stupid anticipation was pulling me out. And by the second time I watched it, I enjoyed it a lot more, because I was like, oh, there's nothing to fear here. Like, everything there was maybe one slight moment, but otherwise I thought they did an incredible job with it. And I don't really honestly know if they de-aged or not. But the younger Clone Wars and the Clone Wars armor Anakin was just freaking amazing. I really loved what they did with that.
I think I'm with you. I think they scaled back on the de-aging, and they probably a little bit more with makeup and things like that. Because Hayden Christensen, while I think he's 42, so he's just a few years younger than us. I think
2 years older, you mean? But yeah, go on. Sorry.
Oh yeah, whatever. You're not kidding me. But anyway, he still has a youthful face to him, so they can be a little more lenient with some of that too, I think. And so you definitely see the creases on his face a little bit, but I think they did a lot of it with makeup to where it wasn't as heavy. Now, I think there is some digital, shading and things like that in order to bring that youthful smoothness to your skin that just naturally goes away over time. But I'm with you. I think they did a really great job of finding a right balance of not hiding the character under CGI, because quite honestly, for as much time as he had on screen, I think that would have been difficult to really do and maintain, especially with the different lighting that they were competing with the stuff on Ryloth and with Siege of Mandalore, and then with the World Between Worlds. It would have just been this really weird smorgasbord, I think, of them trying to balance all of that. And so I think this was probably a really nice balance of our kind of happy medium of what they figured out, that this works. And you're right, it did not take you out of the sequence at all, and you were able to kind of go back and forth and change between Vader and Anakin at one point as well, which was pretty seamless. I wish they would have done the cutaway. I would have preferred to see a little CGI in that case, where you actually see him fading back to Anakin. My only critique there, if there is any, and that's super minor, of course, but that's just because I would have liked to see the transition back rather than a cutaway, which, again, it works, but sometimes you just want to see the transformation happen in real time.
Yeah. What about the dialogue? Let's talk about this. I mean, and we might as well just talk about the lesson in general, because we're gonna get into specific details, during the dream sequences or flashbacks or memory jaunts or whatever they're doing. But I guess the lesson itself, right? How did you interpret the lesson here? And again, I want to be clear. I don't know there's a right or wrong answer. I have conviction, not to coin a term that was used in this, a theme that was used in this particular episode, but I have conviction in mine. But I've seen some really good ones out there, honestly. So what was your takeaway with the lesson?
I think conviction is the right word. I mean, it's very intentional, and I think it's the one to use. Is that she can't decide which way she wants to go. Right? She's going down this path, and it's a slow, slippery slope that she's on. Maybe not towards the extreme dark side that Anakin went, but is definitely going down this path of she needs to choose to let go of some of all of her guilt in her past and actually make the choice with conviction once and for all that this is the person she wants to be. This is the life she wants to live. And that equates to living her life and not being afraid to embrace the people around her, embrace joy, happiness, hope, wonder. The end of the episode is very much that of we could go anywhere, and that's kind of fun. It's better than nowhere, right? I think which was just a complete summary of everything that the lesson was about, right? And so I think it really much was just about making that choice, but also the word conviction was so important. And the way that he got that across, though, was, of course, through Vader, but also it forced her into making an absolute choice of, am I going to choose compassion or am I going to choose anger and aggression and the warrior path? Because, again, his words to her were about legacy, right? And actually, you could have used, Dave Filoni was talking about his legacy as well with Lucas and everybody that's come before him, maybe even Rian Johnson in some extent, but within the context of Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, you have the ability to make choices for the moments that you're in, and you are not necessarily limited to the actions of any one of those individuals either.
Yeah. I like that. I think for me, I think the lesson was, I think, and I'm just stay with me here. So I think about like, there's other things that have happened, like other media where this idea of life versus death, right? And the first one that came to mind when I was watching this is Shawshank Redemption, right? There's a line in there where they're talking about prison and they're talking about get busy living or get busy dying, right? And if you think about from Ahsoka's perspective, she was kind of dying, right? She was stuck in this kind of vagabond, living in the ship, wasn't really herself, carrying all that emotional weight, that emotional baggage, a lot of the guilt that she felt for either the fall of the Jedi Order as a whole, which I think she was kind of going there because she was connecting all the dots, Had I not left Anakin would not have turned to the dark side. Had he not turned to the dark side, he would not have, taken out the entire Jedi Order and et cetera. And then from there, just, domino effect into all the problems of the universe or all the problems of the galaxy. And she was like feeling like this is a weight on her shoulders. And so she's never been able to progress. And so from that perspective, I think she was dying, right? Almost not literally, but she was just becoming this shallowed, hollowed out, darker side of herself. Not the person that, we all knew in the Clone Wars and the person that I think we see at the very end of this episode. The other, in this first moment too, when they're kind of talking about, he asks, what happened? She's like, what happened? He says, you lost. Like, as in you lost and you died. And she doesn't remember at first, right? And then eventually she comes around, is like, oh, Balin's skull. And he goes, oh, okay, you remember. Now you have a chance. You remembered what had happened to you, so you have an opportunity to now make this decision between, do you want to let it all go, right? You died, you're dead right now. You have the option now to, mail it in, and finally just kind of move on, become one with the Force if you'd like, or if you want to fight for this, you have the opportunity to go back and to live again. He says you still have a chance. I think that's kind of important because it's going to play out a little bit later when we're talking about the, her final commitment when she says, I choose to live. So I don't want to spoil that just now. We'll come back to the here in just a bit. But I think the lesson, going back to the lesson itself, it's simply that. The other thing that came to mind, it's my quote that I have on there, live or die, man. This is from the Karate Kid too. And this is kind of corny, kind of silly, but it's true, right? It was the discussion. You can choose to die in your guilt. You can choose to die in your anger and live a life that is probably not worth living. Or you can let all that go, try to make peace with that, right? And live a very happy life or a life that you're at least content with. And that's kind of what this lesson is. There's other examples of this. I think a lot of the stuff that we saw in Star Wars Visions, this is what echoes there. I think about Rey Skywalker and the Rise of Skywalker when everybody's telling her to get up, right? She's literally fighting for her life. She has to get back up. She could have easily just died, and through the will of the Force or the will of the Jedi, the support and the backing of all these Jedi saying, get up, fight, right? She chose to live. I think it's an analogy in some ways for Vader as well, right? He chose to kind of die by giving in to the dark side and just doing what Palpatine said. And it wasn't until Luke inspired him to live again that he was able to kind of see the light. I think it's an analogy of the Ryloth, I'm sorry, not Ryloth, Lothal. Right, Lothal was in this. They had the chance. They had the opportunity to kind of live or die. They chose to fight, and that's what this lesson was. The lesson is you are a warrior, and you're a warrior. You're fighting to live, and you're not living to fight. There's a very distinct difference between the two. It goes back to Yoda saying about wars don't make one great. She was choosing as a warrior. He did everything he needed to do. He taught her the right way. She doesn't see that. All she sees is the darker side of what he did, which is made her potentially someone who can turn to the dark side like he did. And really what he was trying to get her to see is, because I've done this to you, you have the ability to get back on your feet. You have the ability to fight for your life if you choose to do it, or you cannot and, die. You move on to the cosmic force where I'm at right now. Right. Kind of thing. So that's how I interpreted the lesson. Actually, I'm going to be working. I was telling Jonesy before he came on here, I've got a lot of this is my talking points from something that I wrote that I'll probably do a recording on, or maybe I'll do it as a jeditorial. But there's more to that. But I don't know your thoughts, I guess, on any of that, or we can just kind of continue to step through this, because we're going to now talk about, after this, we're going to jump back over to the Center Organa thing and Jason's force sensitivity a little bit, and get into Hera as well. Yeah,
I think the only part I would add to that, or maybe just accentuate, is the idea of being a warrior. That's what she thinks that's all that's left for her to be able to be, right? Is to hunt Thrawn down. That's her only real purpose. But you're right, she does have a choice to be able to live for not only herself, but live for her friends, live for Sabine, and kind of that servant leadership type of thing, right? Giving back to something, and also that bringing back a bit of that youthful, buoyancy and an enthusiasm to your life. Everything feels a little bit brighter when you've let that go, and you're not pigeonholed into being one thing. Your legacy is not defined. You continue to define your legacy as you go, and that's what you will leave on in others, so that they can try to do better than you. We are who they grow beyond, right?
Yes.
For Yoda. So I think it's those types of themes are still very consistent, and they bind all of the different Star Wars stories that we've had all together in a very deliberate way these days. I think more so than maybe some of the things we've had in the past, although I think they were doing it in their own way. Now with Dave Filoni, we have a very deliberate path here.
Yeah. This little initial sequence ends, they make the joke about you're old. I thought that was kind of funny and cute, especially given that, he is technically older now, right? Behind the scenes, cheek, wink, wink, nudge, nudge kind of thing. There is he says that he's there to complete her training. I thought, oh man, we're getting into some really good territory here. If he's going to start, take her to school again on some of this stuff.
He's still got the moves, man. That's for sure.
Oh, don't even get me started. There again, I think some people have criticism around the fighting, the choreography. I don't see it, honestly. I mean, if you want to nitpick it, sure. But
yeah, there's a couple things you can nitpick in there, but sure. I think overall, and I think his performance in particular was quite good.
Well, it's just the way he carries himself. There's almost what I called I think I put it in the show notes. Maybe I did. I said there's like a fingerprint, right, for Hayden Christensen, that he has imprinted on the fighting style of Anakin Skywalker. And you can see all kinds of other Jedi Sith fight. Sometimes a lot of those styles look the same, but there's something about Hayden Christensen's physicality and that fingerprint, what he's imprinted on the fighting style of Anakin Skywalker. And they did a really good job of highlighting some of the moves, the way he holds, the way his gait when he's just walking at you as Anakin Skywalker. And then it changes when he's Anakin Skywalker as Darth Vader too. There's a distinct difference between the two characters, and it was just brilliant stuff. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump ahead here, but that stuff was just
was
gold.
Great. I think the other thing is that you were saying, is that power that he brings to his actions, right? So even when he was battling a younger Ahsoka, a kid, you could still see that he was swinging, and at least the way that it came across was that he was swinging hard, right? He wasn't pulling punches at that point. He was really going at it and delivering it. I think that power is always really important, so it doesn't feel like you're holding back in any kind of way.
Well, and it's consistent with the season 7 of Clone Wars, right? When we got that, or not, was it Clone Wars? No, Tales of the Jedi. Right. Where he says the best thing I can do is teach you how to survive, and I'm paraphrasing that lesson in there, right? But he's been consistent. This is just who he is. This is the what was it? Hu Yang said that he was tenacious and intense. Yeah, right. And this is just Anakin Skywalker. So we were seeing it. Yet another example here as well. the whole thing about, hey, what do you got left to teach me? What basically is what Ahsoka says, like, I'm a Jedi master, and I've taken on some of the best of the best, and and he's like, no, there's still, you're never too old to learn. I laughed at that because I think about, he's kind of talking about himself, right? They were very quick to tell him that he would never be a Jedi. He couldn't learn to be a Jedi because of his age as a young Anakin Skywalker. But really what he's probably talking about is him as Darth Vader, right? He had already gone through this whole life, probably never even thought he would ever learn any final lessons at that point. And yet he learned the lesson of love. He learned the lesson of family. And then more importantly, he probably learned, well, he learned the lesson of how to become a Force ghost. So you're never too old to learn how to be a Jedi. So I just like that she was, maybe a little bit, I would say there's still a little bit of naivete, but he was able to kind of teach her that lesson there. I would say let's go to the comments just real quick. There's a lot of stuff in there, and I do apologize. I'm kind of skipping over to it. Jeff talking about, the lesson. He says, I guess I didn't view it as such a physical thing with literal live or die, but that view definitely helps the whole sequence. Miss Sunflower says, it's like Hayden didn't stop his lightsaber training since Revenge of the Sith. He's the best. Yeah, there were some pretty good moments in there. He did that little twirl.
He did the twirl even
oh
behind
my
the back.
goodness.
He still has the poses and everything else.
It was so beautiful. Let's see. Dante, he says, it's full of confidence and the just try and stop me mentality of his movements. Yep. Yeah, definitely has that in, visibly showing when he's fighting and as the way he stands as well. So, okay, let's go back to anything else before we go. I want to get into Jason and Hera next. If you got anything else before we come back to Ahsoka and Anakin. Okay, so we go to the sequence, and this is the one that a lot of people have been talking about. Jason's sitting there, the waves are crashing. He's trying to get a hold of his mom. By the way, this is like one of at least 4 references to The Empire Strikes Back. And what I mean by that is, what is that thing she's holding? I don't remember what it's called, but Han had it when he was setting up the shelter on Hoth. Do you remember that?
Yeah, it's like a communications device or a scanner.
Yeah, it's like a scanner. Right. He was scanning for life forms, I think, or whatever it was. There's not enough life forms on this planet to fill up whatever, blah, blah. Okay. So that was reference number 1. I thought was, kind of cool. But, they have this sequence where, Jason has abilities is what they quote a little bit later. First off, I don't remember the kid's name, but he's got me sold. Like I can be really, honestly, and I hate to say this, but sometimes child actors are incredible. And then sometimes they're just kind of okay. Right. And I'm not going to even pick on anybody I'm not going to pick on kids. That's not what I'm doing. But sometimes you see these these actors and you think, wow, there's a lot there. Like they're holding their stares really well. Or they're really holding the scene together and they're not wandering off or letting their lines die at the very end of the sentences. You know what I mean? Just these little things that kind of put them up in that higher category of caliber acting. And this kid was doing some stuff that I was like, okay, yeah, I can totally get on board with him. Like he's really selling this idea that, he's a Jedi. I can feel what he's feeling. I can feel his emotions half the time. Right? And he's already done a pretty good job of expressing a couple different emotions in the last 2 episodes alone. But I was really, again, I don't remember what his name was, but I would hope that they're going to use this kid as Jason. We're going to get more of Jason. And I'm just going to pull the Band-Aid off because there's been a number of questions here in the chat. But, I mean, do you think we're going to get him trained at any point? And, who is it going to be? Is it going to be Ahsoka? Is it going to be Ezra? Is it going to be Luke Skywalker? And then the final question to that is, who do you want it to be versus who do you think it's going to be?
Well, I want it to be Ezra, I think, because I think that would be kind of bringing the circle. You talk about legacy. I think that would be a really fitting legacy for his dad's Padawan and I guess arguably kind of best friend, if from that respect too, in order to return that favor and give back to the family and continue his legacy on that way. So I would want it to be Ezra, but yeah, I'm with you. I think he did a great job in this episode. I think he pulled off all the things. You're right. Child acting can be very inconsistent and unpredictable. And I think with this kid, we've got exactly, I think, what we need. It fits the part. Now, where we see him after this, I think it's a character that could keep coming back. I know we just had a comment from Miss Sunflower. We hope we see Jason and Skeleton Crew. I don't know. We don't know enough about Skeleton Crew to know where the heck that would fit or how that would work. But I think, yeah, when you look for other opportunities. But again, we know that there will be potentially other opportunities with Mandalorian, any kind of movie that might come afterwards. all the band's going to get back together in some way at some point because that's just how we do things. So it's not the last we've seen of Jason Syndulla. And I think maybe not even the last we've seen him in this series. I think we're at least going to see him once, if not twice more.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't know about Skeleton Crew. I mean, that would be kind of cool. That'd be the biggest secret kept, although that's probably not fair. They haven't even had, I mean, by this point,
there's a lot of secrets with that show. So,
yeah, well, we're probably not going to get, we're not getting it until 2024 at this point. But
right.
I think if it had stayed on schedule, maybe by now we would have started gotten, little things here and there. But I was going to say it would probably be the best kept secret because there's been no indication that he would be in that, or maybe he pops up later as a solo. I mean, I like the idea. It's a way to kind of bridge everything. He's probably in the right age group based on some of the actors and actresses that we've seen for the kids already for Skeleton Crew. I don't know that we're going to see it. I think we'll get Jason and Hera. I had this as a question at the very end, but since we're talking about it, I don't know that we're going to get him again in the series with 3 episodes left. And we gotta give all the background on where the heck they are, explain all that, or at least show it to us. And then we've got Thrawn, and we've got to get them back. I think, if not all of them back, I think there's just not enough time to bring them back. And I like the way it ended this episode with Harris. Essentially, it was the Empire Strikes Back ending all over again, almost line for line. But I love the way that ended because it was a kind of homage to the Empire Strikes Back, but it was also very similar to Farewell and Friends, or Friends and Farewell, the final episode in season 4 Rebels. So I kind of like the way they ended there. I'd be okay if they showed up at the very end when everybody gets there and there's just one scene. They maybe have a couple lines, but I don't think they're going to play a prominent role. If they do, then I think they would have to come back from the Peridia or wherever, the other galaxy, within about an episode, maybe 2, right? No more than 2. I think there's just not enough time to bring them back. But I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't love it. I'd freaking love to have them on there. It feels like they kind of said, push pause at least on those 2 characters, and we'll pick it up in another series at some point. But
yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. And maybe if we have enough time at the end of the episode, maybe we'll speculate where part 6 goes officially this time. But, I think we don't really know what Hera's future is now, of course, either. I mean, we'll talk about it, but, her commission seems like it might be revoked or suspended. And so her presumably that would mean she would lose the Ghost, though, because the Ghost is her ship. But who knows with all these New Republic politics these days. But I don't know. I still think that if Thrawn comes back and there's some sort of fight or battle when he comes back, it just seems like Hera and company would be a part of it in some way. So, but again, what to see how far we get in the next couple of episodes to see how real that becomes. But if they come back to this galaxy, I think Hera and company are definitely involved in some way.
Yes, I would agree with that. Yep, for sure. Like, she cannot be a part of it at that point. Plus, it validates her suspicions and all that, which I think we're going to need, because I think right now she still doesn't have a lot. I mean, yeah, they got the space wells and all that, but yeah, okay, we'll talk more.
But she's actually been in a lot more of the show than I think, at least I originally anticipated early on.
So.
I thought it would be a bit of more of a glorified cameo, maybe 2 times, but a lot of screen time here and a lot more screen time for Jason than I thought we would get. So
yeah, and the scene that we're going to talk about next is just that. Here's my take on it. Like, I don't have a problem with the fact that she was able to hear the lightsabers, because all she did was hear lightsabers. And you got to remember a couple things. Let's put this in perspective. Number one, who was she intimately in love with? A Jedi, right? Kanan Jarrus. She's given birth to a child who is Force sensitive. On top of that, they're on this planet of Cetos. Again, reflective point or whatever it is, steeped in the Force in some way of some sort, right? So add that to the list. Then you got just the concept of opening yourself up to believing. The same thing, what happened with Luke and the difference, right, between Luke and Han in episode 4 when Kenobi's, right? He's laughing at it. Luke's trying to believe. And the minute he starts to believe, he says, I think I saw something, right? I feel like, you're taking your first step, right? You've got to have that belief in there. And because her lover was a Jedi, her son is Force sensitive, she is so much more open to believing in all of that. And so it allowed her, again, with everything else going on, the presence of the world between worlds, the fact that it's Ahsoka, right? All of these things combined, I think it's fine. I don't think there's a problem with us saying that, again, through Jason as a conduit, or if you want to even look at it from that perspective, because he was there, she was able to hear something, and that's it. We don't have to go to the extreme of holy bananas, everybody in the galaxy now has the Force. That's not what Filoni was trying to do. He was just saying in that moment, she was able to hear the lightsabers, and that was enough for her. Like, she's not going to second guess it. She's not going to doubt it away. She's going to run with it. I heard the lightsabers. My kid's right. These guys are around here. We're not stopping any of the searches until we found them, because they have to be here at this point. That's that conviction that she has for all those reasons. So,
and again, there's a bit of precedence here with Hera already, because she could feel Kanan on her shoulder, right?
Yes.
In Rebels after he
great
passed.
Idea. Yes. Yes.
So I mean, there's already something, whatever that is, and I don't know that we spend a whole lot of time analyzing that, at least when we did our From a Certain Point of View shows with the Patreon members. But again, we see that clearly, and they showed us Kanan. It wasn't just her imagining it. At one point, it might have been her imagining it, but at one point, if we're to believe what we saw, then he was absolutely there in spirit or presence, or at least aura, and she felt something, right? So that she's open and willing to listen. Again, Kanan's message and lesson of listening and just being open to things, and again, trusting her kid, and then Jason's ability to maybe, I don't know if he's amplifying any of this, but I'm with you. This place is special, right? I think, and that's why even with the Ahsoka's, whatever we want to call it, whether we want to call it a world between world, a portal, or death, or a dream sequence, or whatever it might actually be, which is probably just the dream sequence for you, then it would be, I think, I can't stop, because when I was watching this, I was like, man, this is totally a dream sequence. This is great.
Shut up, it's not.
Albert's crying right now.
No.
But again, that there's something special about this place. We've been told it's special, so why not let it be special in some way and not have to over-engineer and over-explain some of the stuff? She was just listening, like everybody keeps telling people to do. If you listen and you have patience and you train, you work hard at it too, and granted that part's not necessarily there, but if you have patience and you listen, you can be open to things that maybe you wouldn't normally be open to. So
Yeah.
why is that such a bad thing, right? It doesn't mean that you're going to go out there and start moving objects everywhere.
No.
Not everybody's going to have the patience to go do that. So
Right.
and the discipline, right?
Riss says, I mean, the two did become one, and he does not mean that, to be clear, in the Spice Girls way. Miss Sunflower says, I think I can't believe you just did the two become one gesture from the video. Miss Sunflower says, I think Jason just channeled what he's hearing to Hera. That's kind of like that conduit piece, or maybe he's like, here, let me, I don't know, connect with you and let you hear, open your ears kind of thing. Riss said, surely something passed through. So I think that at least those folks are definitely in agreement with it. So I don't know why it was such a hard to get there. Okay, but the funniest part from that was the fact that you now have Carson Teva sitting there, and what he says, what am I missing? What just happened? Like, it was like an analogy for all the people that had never watched Rebels. You know what I mean? Like, or knew what the World Between Worlds was, or just kind of the everyman that's coming into the series. He's kind of speaking for some folks, like, what the heck's going on here? And then even further, like, if you think about the whales at the very end, I'm sure that really had a lot of people scratching their head. But I loved his expression here. And then later on, when the whales show up, because I don't know if we'll get into it later, but when the whales showed up and he was kind of like, yeah, wow, this is super weird, but I'm kind of digging it. He's kind of bobbing his head like, hey, I'm just rolling with it, right? He did a great job. My love for that character is now way higher because of this series, and it had nothing to do with Mando. I was just kind of indifferent. I didn't hate him or anything, but I was just kind of, whatever. But I got a new perspective on him from this series.
All the excuses were great, and then for him just to give up, look, you're just not going to believe me. I'm just going to be straight with you. Right. I don't even believe what I'm going to tell you. But
so there's these whales, and they're in space, right? Yeah. Good luck explaining that one. Which is what we're doing. Like, I mean, I'm talking to people about this series and trying to sell it, and they're like, "Oh, what is it?" Well, you see, there's these whales. Whales, yeah, just hang tight. Whales in space, and they've got like a force affinity. They can hype. It's just. It gets so cockamamia when you're trying to explain it, but then, you get people to watch it and they're like, oh, okay, yeah, they're Carson Teva. They're like, all right, sure, let's just go with this. I can go with,
let's get weird.
Space whales.
Right.
It's weird. Okay. So the whole thing about, he's like, okay, well, we better get on it then. Yeah. He just kind of accepts it. We're doing this. But I did have in here also, and I think you've said it enough, but there were similarities to Kanan. Everything from the way he was standing, his presence, there's something about it. And I may be looking too much into it, but that is what he did there, and the way he was kind of reaching out. We saw it so many times. There's so many examples in Rebels where Kanan just felt the force. And we saw Ezra do the same thing when he was trying to find or no, it was Kanan. Kanan when he was looking for Hera, right after she had been captured and was taken. This is right before he died in Jedi Knight. You know, they knew exactly where he was or she was because he was using the Force. So it would, you know, this is similar. Right? These are the gene. This is genetic in a lot of ways. So. Okay, we get back to the World Between Worlds. We've already kind of talked about the fighting sequences here, and I haven't taught you everything yet. Cuts the bridge, and they go down, and we get into this first part, the first part of this lesson. This is Ryloth, if I'm not mistaken, from
That's
one of the battles.
I
don't remember
which.
Do you remember the episode, or did you get?
I didn't have a chance to go look it up.
It's in Clone Wars,
Right.
but in season 1, I think, towards the end of the season, if I'm not mistaken, but. Maybe I'm wrong. All right. Either way, this
doesn't matter. Right.
It doesn't matter, but it does. It does matter. So yeah, I mean, getting to see the Anakin Skywalker wearing his clone armor, the younger, shorter hair kind of thing. He's like, she's like, this is the Clone Wars. He's like, yeah, no kidding. Like, there were some really good moments in there too, where and this is where I felt like he was just along for the ride. Like this was Ahsoka probably driving, or maybe he was kind of going into where there were pivotal moments, right? These kind of these inflection points for her in her memory, and where some of the doubt started to seep in, or where she felt like she was responsible, or maybe even retrospectively as an adult, she was looking back and saying, I can recall this particular moment and this particular moment where I felt like I was contributing to all of this, right? I was contributing to the downfall. I was a part of this war. I was sending people to their death. And I think it's a very interesting perspective, because it is, in some ways, the adult Ahsoka looking back on the memories. And then later on, she's almost talking like from the perspective of the younger Ahsoka, really not, you know what I mean? Like that was a very interesting dynamic.
Right.
But I do like more, I think what's more intriguing is this older Ahsoka being able to look at the Clone Wars through this kind of a memory thing and realize that not only was it bad in the moment, but having the perspective that she has now, and knowing that this war was disingenuous, that it was all fabricated from Palpatine. I mean, that feels like it's got to hurt and cut more, which I think is contributing to a lot of that guilt and the doubt that she has in herself about whether or not she really was a good person. Has she really been a good Jedi? Has she been truly a protector of the galaxy? I think in her mind, at least at this point, she's like, no, I'm just like you, Anakin. I caused all of this, including you.
Yeah, if you remember back, I mean, if you go rewatch those, really most of the Clone Wars, especially those first few seasons, she was very eager, very excited, wanted action. Rex had to put her in her place. You know, that youthful enthusiasm coming through to where she was blinded by what was actually happening, right? The Barriss Offees of the world hadn't surfaced yet, of that discontent with where the Jedi were devolving into and what they were becoming, and the risk that presented to the Order and to their connection with the Force in a lot of different ways, right? So she had that perspective now that she didn't have back then, which is always unique to see that and actually have come through the mouth of a kid as well in this case. And the young actress that did this, I think her name is Ariana Greenblatt, did a really great job, I think, of conveying the emotion and the sentiment and the regret, right? All of the things that we knew Ahsoka was feeling, they came through a bit more unfiltered because, and I kind of looked at it, well, through a kid, she doesn't have the ability to kind of filter those emotions as well, right? And so she takes that moment to pause where before she might have distanced herself a bit from that realism of what they were actually causing and how they were all contributing to it and how she was contributing to the downfall of the Jedi in some way.
Yep, that's exactly right. I want to go to, sorry, Steph, I don't mean to call you out, but it is like perfect. It is so perfect here. So Steph just said in the chat, she said, I'm not going to lie, I'm not sure why the purpose of her going through these memories again was. And that lines up perfectly with what Ahsoka says. She says, why are we here? And he says, you tell me. And she says, I don't understand. He says, that's the problem, right? This is part of her training. And what I would say is all of the, at least this sequence and then in the next dream sequence or flashback or whatever you want to call it, World Between Worlds, however you interpret it, it was to show her, because in the key giveaway here is at the very end of the scene where she says, it was my fault. Like she is putting the blame on her because she was in the middle of this war, right? She was following orders. And because she followed orders blindly, she went and got a lot of these clones killed. And when she's looking at that clone trooper, like, I have no doubt she was sympathetic at the time. We never really got to see that on screen a whole lot, I think, right? With the troopers dying and stuff. And yeah, sure, it was sad, but we were moving on and there's a billion of them, so who cares? But she's got a different perspective now. When she's that little kid, at least again, from the perspective of the older Ahsoka as the little kid, that's Rex, right? That's all those troopers she eventually had very deep and emotional relationships with. Like these were her friends, these were her brothers, these were, the best of the best that life had to offer. She did probably have that same perspective, right, as a kid, but she does now, and that's why I think like it was very interesting. It was beautiful to see her sitting there and with this one trooper who looks like many of them, but she took the time to sit down with him, was holding his hand. You could tell she was really remorseful for what had happened. You could see the guilt coming in her, thinking this is another one that I killed. And this lesson here was to get her to understand, like, no, you didn't do this. Like you were doing what you needed to do, but this isn't your fault, right? You didn't have a choice at the time, and you can't put this on your shoulders. It's not fair. It's eating away at you is kind of really what he was trying to say here.
Right, exactly. And that Anakin is trying to help her understand, look, I had to mold you in order to help you survive because we were in a war, whether we wanted to be in one or not, and being part of this order. And she was a kid. She wasn't going to make a different choice at that point. So you almost have to forgive yourself in that regard of saying, look, you made the best decisions you could because you were allowed to, or you didn't know any better. And I had to train you a certain way to make sure that you could survive in order to make better decisions and make a different decision and eventually come to this reflex point, if you will, of being able to say, how do I want to live my life from now? And how do I gather and use all of these other experiences? But she had to be reminded of some of that too, of Anakin's reasoning, I think was part of it, right? Anakin still needed to remind her more deliberately and specifically, I molded you in this way for a very specific purpose. Do you remember that lesson? And this is where I thought we were going to get the quotes that we've had in the trailer from the Tales of the Jedi stuff that we've heard, which we've still not had yet. And I thought for sure we were going to have it somewhere in this context here because it really would have fit, right? So really, really well. Maybe not within the context of the battle, but at least the scene they were painting in that way. Mm-hmm. But he had to remind her of these types of things. And she wasn't getting it because she was just blinded to it. She was so fixated on Anakin's journey and all of this and what he created in her, but also that she's unable to escape it. You have to understand the why sometimes before you can make a different decision later on. You have to kind of accept that in yourself as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And he tells her, it's a war. Jedi lead. We're going to make mistakes. What you do is you adjust to the times. And it's kind of foreshadowing. That was a great
point. Yeah. Adjust to the times was a really important comment, right?
Yeah. And it's almost foreshadowing to where she ends up at the very end of the episode. She's adjusting to the times. They're no longer at war. And the galaxy needs a different kind of Jedi. And I think that's what we're getting with Ahsoka the White or whoever she may be now at this point, or that rebirth. I think she took that piece to heart at the very end. He talked about the difference between keepers of the peace versus soldiers, echoing Mace Windu in, episode 1? He tells her, it is his job as a teacher, as a Padawan to fight. Because as a warrior, if you stop fighting, you die. That's the lesson. If you stop fighting, you die. If you stop fighting for your life in this underwater, in the world between worlds, in whatever dream sequence, as Jonesy likes to say, they're in, she is not going to make it out. She's done, kind of thing. And then to your point, and I want to kind of touch on what Dante's saying here because I think it's significant. He says, I think it was intentionally significant that even though she knew the Clone Wars were fabricated and she was in some Force-induced recalled experience, she still chose to keep fighting. Exactly. The first lesson, she passed the first hurdle, I guess, which was, they went into this memory of her doubting her, or I guess her taking on the responsibility, all the blame, the guilt for all of these clone troopers dying. But he did enough to convince her that he said, come on, we got to go. And then he runs off. And of course he turns into Vader, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But yeah, she chose to go. That was the first checkpoint, right? Of can you keep going? How much more can you go through with all of this? And it gets a little bit more emotional, a little more deeper until we finally culminate with them fighting each other, of course. But yeah, he's right. There was the first checkpoint. She passed. She went on to it. She's got 2 more to go. Okay, we flip back over to the Ghost, where we've got Huyang and Hera. That was a really good sequence again. It was a good way to kind of break things up, because we just had a pretty heavy, intense, emotional flashback sequence or whatever it was with the Clone Wars, and then we get back to reality here. And I thought it was great to hear Huyang say that you do things your way because you care. That's why people like you. Like, in a nutshell, that is exactly everything that Hera stood for in Rebels and everything the Ghost Crew stood for, right? So I thought it was very insightful for him to see that. I did like the little comment he said about, people don't normally disappear, or he says, vanish in thin air. And he says, normally, no. Knowing and teasing that, Force ghosts live out there, or you think about Kenobi disappearing into midair, or Yoda disappearing in midair kind of thing. So, yeah, that was great. And then the whole thing about the Tenacious, right? Recalling the lineage, the legacy of Ahsoka Tano, meaning, she was trained by Anakin Skywalker. It didn't ever dawn on me, and I don't know why this is so obvious, but when Hera had that, like, what was he like? Like, it was so innocent and so pure. And I thought, holy crap, yeah, she wouldn't know. Most people don't know who trained her. And she probably keeps a lot of that to herself these days. She's not going to go out there and tell everybody, But so I loved the fact that she asked that question, and he responded back that she was tenacious like her master. And she said, what was her master like? He said, well, he was intense, which we saw again. I think we talked about this earlier. But certainly all throughout this episode and everything that we can think about, one of the better words to describe Anakin Skywalker. So anything else you want to add? Let's your thoughts, I guess, on this scene or anything I missed.
No, I think he summed it up pretty well.
Okay. We get the call from Chopper to go low, to go scan, because he had an idea of where it was or where she could possibly be. And then we cut over to Siege of Mandalore. Okay. So she was definitely older in the sequence. Was that the same actress?
Yes.
And apologies, because this is not even 24 hours yet. I think I guess it has been. But I didn't even look to see if it was the same actress that played her in both scenes there.
Yep, same one.
Okay. All right.
And her poses in Siege of Mandalore were so spot on for just the standing pose, very much Ahsoka and how she was represented in that episode or that series of episodes. She did a really good job.
And we got more acrobatic fighting from her as well in this. We had that little sequence there, which was fine. I mean, I think they were trying to just reestablish the fact of who she was and where she was.
And again, for the people who want to criticize a kid's lightsaber abilities, I'm sorry, you're not going to emulate what you had in the cartoon. We've already said that with adults and everybody else, you just can't do it. And you're definitely not going to get it from a real life, kid or teenager either. They're just not going to do it in the same kind of way. But I thought she did great. I think they did well enough to be able to show her abilities and a lot of that stuff to where it still got the point across. And I thought it was still really, really solid too. I thought she did a good job overall.
Yeah. This is where we got the live action Rex. I forget what his line was, but he basically was like, come on, let's go kind of thing, and ran off into the war, the battle there. Did they credit him? Was it Tamara Morrison, or did they get D. Bradley Baker?
No, that was Tamara Morrison.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it was rumored that he had done some lines, and I think the rumors only that I saw were that he was never on screen, like they never brought him in to do anything. It was just kind of voice recording. So
yeah, because even the troopers that were laying on the cots in the first sequence all had coverings over their head or other things.
A mask. I think one had a mask on their face. So
yeah, you couldn't see any of their facial features. So
yeah, and if he had been there, they would have taken the opportunity to show him. Right? I mean, they gave him a cameo for Kenobi as the bum trooper.
I actually like that they didn't, because I think we have a very clear picture of Rex in our heads, and so to bring him in and say that's Rex now, I think it would be really difficult for us to do. Mm-hmm. So I'm actually glad they went this route. I thought that played much better.
Yeah. I do like the line of, I don't know this battle. And he's got his, by the way, his body posture is very different now. Like, it is borderline Darth Vader. This is at Revenge of the Sith. I mean, this is right at 0 hour for him when he becomes Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah, this was several years later, right?
Yeah, but to see him the way he was, and you're like, oh crap, this is somebody that's not the same Anakin that we just had in the previous sequence, which was important. But even the way he was kind of cocky and had his head back and saying, I don't know this battle, right? He said it looks intense, which I was like, oh look, there it is. They're talking about the intensity of things again, and we get into this whole thing about you're a warrior now as I trained you, right? More reaffirmation about the lesson at hand. But then we get into this Ahsoka's legacy, where he's trying to tell her he's talking to her about her legacy and what it means. And he says, Ahsoka, within you will be everything that I am, all the knowledge I possess, just as I inherited knowledge from my master and he from his. You're a part of the legacy. I think she really needed to hear this, because I think she does think about this, but I think what he's trying to say is, you're focusing on all the bad, right? You're only focusing on the negative of the legacy. You've got people in your lineage like Kenobi, Qui-Gon, if you want to throw him in there, right? Earlier on, you've got Yoda in your lineage. So it's a very powerful, it's a very hopeful lineage. It's a very light focused lineage, right? Even though all you can see is who I am right now, Darth Vader, you need to focus, you need to refocus the attention and understand that there's a lot of good in you that has come because of this legacy that you're now about to carry on.
Yeah, exactly. And it carries on in you for your apprentices later on too, right? It's a culmination of everything that you have been and everything that you will be. And they will continue on that path, right? I mean, we see this, we've seen it in a bunch of content. The books do a really good job of usually leaning in on these types of themes more so than the TV shows and the movies.
Master and Apprentice comes to mind when you said that.
Yeah, it did. And I think Brotherhood, I think did a little bit of that too.
Oh yeah, Brotherhood.
A little in Shadow of the Sith. I mean, the High Republic, I think, has leaned into this pretty nicely at times as well. So there's been a lot of content that really leans on the legacy and, and I think even Rise of Skywalker to an extent, right, of Yoda and what we talked at the start of the show. We are what they grow, we are what they grow beyond.
Beyond, right? Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, that idea, that's legacy, right? That's what's important. That's what they need to take everything they have, and then they also need to shape it in their own way. But you can't be limited by all of that, too. You are more. And that's what he's trying to tell her. You are actually more than this. You are more than that because I am more than this, right? And some of it almost seems self-serving in a bit because Anakin's trying to almost justify that I'm not just all these things that you think I am. I'm a lot more than maybe what you want to give me credit for. Right. But also, so are you. And I'm trying to spin that in a more positive way of saying, you are too. Don't forget that. You can make choices and different choices, the same choices, whatever you want, but they're yours to make. And you can be whatever path you want to, or you can go whatever path you actually want to go, but you have to have the conviction to go do it. And you can't have something holding you back. And I love his response when he said, oh, this is what this is about. Yep. Okay, back to the beginning.
Like you were, okay, so all you want to do is focus on Vader, right? You're not listening to what I said. I'm more than that, right? You're more than that. He said, because she says, but my part of that legacy is one of death and destruction. That's all she sees. All she sees is the death and destruction that came about from Anakin Skywalker, who turned into Darth Vader, because she left the Jedi Order, right? She keeps going back to that. And that's why he's like, come on, you're still stuck on this. And when he hears that, I'm going to jump ahead here. I want to come back to a couple things on the rest of that conversation. But that's why he ends up turning into Vader. Like, okay, we're resetting here. You're still giving in to, I want to die. You're not choosing to live. And so, all right, I'm going to take a different angle, right? I gave you the good side. Now I'm going to give you the evil side and see how you respond to that, right? You'll get, if you want to see Anakin Skywalker, if you want to see or Darth Vader, if you really want to see what that is like and you want to confront that, fine, let's do it, right?
I told you, man, we had Anakin Ghost of Christmas Past, and now we're going to Ghost of Christmas Future. Well,
and I love the fact, and again, I'm not saying this is confirmation, but in my head canon, like the duality of that and him being able to, like, he's so one with himself now and comfortable with, like, I've always, and again, I could be wrong. Prior to this episode, I would say the Anakin Skywalker that we saw at the end of Return of the Jedi was one of light and there was never a dark. You know what I mean? Like, he would never be able to go back. Mm-hmm. But this is a different take on it, if I'm interpreting this right, in that it is an Anakin Skywalker who truly can tap into the dark side, Darth Vader, and tap into the Anakin Skywalker, puppy dog eyes, Hayden Christensen Skywalker, which I love, right? I love that fact that, and he can probably do this. Yeah. I mean, I would expect him to be the light side all the time, but for the sake of this lesson, he's able to go there, right? Which is just a whole nother dimension to him that I never really, ever conceived. And again, I could be wrong, but I'd love the fact that if that were the case.
Well, and we talked about this on the Patreon show, is that it is just Anakin in all the different ways, right? This is Anakin Skywalker. And at this point, in order for him to be one with the cosmic force and to do all the things we saw at the very end of Return of the Jedi and to be able to come back and maybe even to be in this place here in this moment, he had to embrace and accept and this is the lesson, right? I had to accept all the things that I am, all the things that I've done, all the things that I could have been, right? And the decisions I could have made differently, and the things I did really well, but they are all me. And let me show you what you're going to become and to give you the ultimate choice here and kind of force her into that position. So I think that was the only part that, while I enjoyed the sequence, like when I thought about it, I was like, do I really like that Anakin kind of forced her to make the choice? But then again, she wasn't necessarily going to make the choice on her own, it didn't seem like. And so he was like, all right, to hell with this. if this is what you want, then this is what I'll give you, right? And you're going to come to that moment, and you have to choose. What are you going to choose?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I like that it's just Anakin. Yeah, it's not. I know you're doing this more for illustrative purposes of just kind of illustrating what we have of tapping into this or that. But it's just Anakin. It's just these are all the things of who he is. He is Vader. He is Anakin. He's that little boy on Tatooine, right? He is all of these different things, and he can bring those about whenever it needs to. And then for Ahsoka is what she needed in these moments, and he's trying to help her in the best way that he can. And it's by showing him all sides of himself too, so that she can see it and respond.
Yeah. Yeah. The rest of this sequence here, so the rest of the lines, she says that legacy is one of death and destruction. Again, blaming herself for that's all she ever is probably going to ever amount to.
And that's Balin's goal in her head too, right? So,
well, yeah, for sure, right? That line that he says to her that you're just like your master is what he told her. Like, put that doubt in her head, or reaffirm that doubt, I guess, in her head. And he says, "You're more than that." Anakin says, "But you're more than that because I'm more than that, right? I'm not just the Darth Vader stuff. I'm all the other stuff, all the stuff that you just said." And then she says, "You're more than that, Anakin, but more powerful and dangerous than anyone realized." So again, he feels like he's getting through to her. She's not. Clearly, he's not getting through to her because she keeps going back to it. And because she even says, "If I'm everything, then you are," right? Her logic is such that I'm eventually, maybe she doesn't, well, I don't know. I guess the question would be, do you feel like she's gotten to the point now where she is intimidated by this idea that at some point she may be tempted by the dark side, and she may follow in the footsteps of her master? And I think the way I was interpreting it is yes. And he's trying to get her to understand that, no, you get to choose that. It's not this legacy. The dark side of the legacy isn't what defines you. It's what you want to define yourself as.
That's a tough question, because I think there's a part of me that says no, but then we go back to what we presume what she did to Morgan Elsbeth to get information out of her, which would presumably be less than Jedi tactics, right? Is basically what we were told. What does that actually mean? Was that torture? That's a very dark path, right? I think a lot of this is more of just, she just feels, I don't know, she just has all of this, not only self-doubt, but what's the word, where she's, anyway, she can't forgive herself in any kind of way. So she's just going to, cave in on herself and just be swallowed up by all the guilt and everything else. And so is it going to lead her to a darker path? Maybe, because she'll start to make concessions. Is that his point? I don't know necessarily, I think, in that regard, but I think overall to the point though, is that she's not listening. She doesn't want to open herself up, and she wants to dwell on this. If that's what you don't want to dwell on, then okay, then we'll force your hand and let's show you what you actually need to. Let's show you what your future will look like then. And in that regard, if we want to take that more literally.
Yeah, Briss chimed in and said, we like to think it's her choice, but he's steering the situation.
He's pushing her to that decision point, right? So right. I think he's in control.
He's forcing her to make a decision. He's forcing her to make a choice, right?
Right. She's still holding on.
Teetering. Steph said, I love seeing all the scenes, but I don't think the lesson was clear enough for me, the audience, to truly be heartfelt and meaningful. Are we helping or hurting? That's what I'm worried about now.
I think it might be the latter on this one. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's pretty clear.
And this is why that's why I like to kind of keep. I think Filoni's and I think what he's intending to do is usually to keep it fairly straightforward and clean. But I think we do take all of these scenes and we do a little bit of it here, and we're good at it, and sometimes we're not so good at it. But we do try to dig in all the interesting parts of it, which do start to confuse, I think, how they actually all fit together. But at the end of the day, really, I think Filoni's intention was for it to be clean and kind of clear. But I do question, though. I think Stephanie's point is well taken, though. If you're not steeped in a lot of this stuff, and I'm really curious to get people's context at work and maybe people kind of outside of our community, and to be able to bring that back to the show and say, okay, here's some of the things I've gotten from people who maybe said, yeah, it was really clear, or no, I had no idea what the hell was going on. It was just weird. But it was cool seeing Anakin on there. Whatever that was. So I'm curious to get that feedback over the next week or two and see what their interpretations are as they let that soak in a little bit more.
Yeah. All right. Well, she says, if I'm everything you are, and probably the rest of that sentence was, then I'm going to be just like you, right? And he's like, that's enough. He says, you've learned nothing, back to the beginning, reset. And this is
Live or
where
die.
like it's live or die, right? And the music picks up. We get, evil Anakin. He's got the Sith eyes. The red lightsaber comes out. There's the flashes of Vader, right,
was really
coming at
cool.
her. He
That
kicked
was
her,
really cool.
like kicked her butt, literally kicked her chest back into the world between worlds, out of the memories, out of the dream sequence, whatever's going on, back into the world between worlds, and comes at her, and we get the whole fight going on there between her. In fact, even before they fight, when she's laying there after he kicks her out, we get the breathing, which is kind of like the first signal that Vader is coming. And then Anakin walks through the portal or out of the cloud or whatever it is. I love that they kind of mixed his voice with Anakin again, similar to what they did in the Kenobi series, right? Where it's kind of a mixture between Vader and Hayden Christensen's voice, which is great. But he says you lack conviction, which I think what we talked about at the very beginning, that's kind of really what this is all about. I mean, I'll come back to the lesson a little bit because I hope I didn't, like you said earlier, I feel like we're tossing out all these ideas and stuff in theory, and we're probably muddying up the thing. I think you're right. I think the lesson's pretty straightforward. It's Filoni. I think we may have overthought some of this stuff for the sake of fun discussion and, speculation. But I think the message is simple. But the idea that she does lack conviction, she doesn't believe that she wants to live or die. She's not making a choice. And so he's going to force her to make a choice right now. And so they go to the battle and he says, time to die. I guess, what were your thoughts as you were watching this, seeing Anakin Skywalker, let me back up, seeing Darth Vader, essentially here, seeing the red eyes, and take us all the way up until when they lock lightsabers, right? And, were her eyes red? Did we see an evil version of Ahsoka? I've watched that scene a few times and I'm like 50-50. I know it's fun to think that that's what happened.
Very ambiguous, isn't it?
But it's not clear to me. Like Anakin, I can see it. Like his eyes stay red the entire time. If they did it, it's so subtle. The flare of her red eyes coming out is so subtle that, but I think it's ambiguous. I think he did that on purpose. I think this is one of those things that he left out there for interpretation for some folks to think that, he finally got a reaction out of her and got her to really cross over, but because she was able to restrain herself, or no, it was just the fact that she's right up against a red lightsaber. And if you look at it, the lighting is such that it does illuminate the white portions of her eyes, but it does get brighter at one point too. So I don't know. I guess take us through that fighting sequence, what you were thinking, and then what's your call on whether or not we saw evil Ahsoka appear for half of a second there?
Well, and maybe just tackle that right away, I guess, since you did a nice segue into it. I think it is a flash of yellow in there. And we've seen this in other characters before in some of the other content as well, because I think it's that moment where she brings the lightsaber to his throat and you could almost hear the sneer. You could almost hear the growl, that you just expect to come out of her voice as she pushes it and just want to like give in to that anger and have that moment. And I think it is a flash of yellow. I think it's a really nice effect to where you can debate about how serious she was about it, of whether it was just the reflection of the lightsaber or was it really the dark side manifesting itself visually like we've seen in Sith characters. And I'd like to think that it was that. I really do think it was. I think it was a flash of ring of yellow just in that brief moment, kind of like Luke Skywalker in Last Jedi, right? I had this brief moment of weakness where it's what I wanted to do, but she doesn't have the shame part. She's like, no, I can choose. I can make a different choice. I can choose to live. The one thing I really wanted here, though, that I swear I thought they were going to do it, and I was going to probably bawl if they did. I was just going to just melt into a puddle and cry.
Yeah.
Was I thought she was going to throw the lightsaber away, or I choose to live. She throws it away, and I thought she was going to give him a hug. And if she would have hugged him, I would have lost it.
A big old Rex hug from the Rebels.
Dude, I mean, what would have been more fitting for like the ultimate act of? I mean, because I'm on record numerous times over the last couple of months here, saying that I would love to hear some sort of "I forgive you" type of moment, because it's that verbal release of saying, I can finally let go of everything. I forgive you, and by extension, I'm forgiving myself, right? In that dialogue, and that's kind of what I think Lauren and I had talked about this while you were away one time. I think that was where we were kind of hoping that would resolve a little bit, where they'd have that conversation, right? And I think this was kind of close though, where she says, "I choose to live," and I just love the way she delivered the line. This is the part where I got a little choked up, and I was just waiting. If they hugged, I would have absolutely lost it. Had to pause for like 5 minutes and walked away and recovered for a little bit. But I think it was real though. I think that she really did consider it and said, "This is the time where I will either become him or I can choose." he chose death through the dark side. Only through Luke and others did he be able to return. But, I think she's like, no, that's not how I want to live. I do have a choice. I can make a better choice and do better than him and grow beyond what he was able to accomplish at this stage in his life. So I really like that. But this fight sequence in general was really entertaining. I thought it was really good. A lot of callbacks to Rebels. She was on her heels. He was clearly overpowering her. And it was just, you could just see the power. I mean, he kind of did this in the first battle they had too, one-handed, a lot of strokes, a lot of fencing type of moves actually, which was a little bit surprising. But in this one, it was pure Vader, to your point, of just absolute power and overwhelming her. And there was just no way that she was going to be able to defeat him. But then as soon as she didn't have a weapon, and I forgot where we talked about this before, where I love it when Jedi don't have lightsabers and then the most powerful because they don't have the weapon and they have to rely on their other skills in order to make a difference. And so she was able to not fight him, but then at the same time disarm him and put him in a position on the other side of the coin here.
There's a part of me, and I like that. I think that's probably my prevailing theory too, that she was able to just disarm him. There is a part of me too that would be okay with Anakin, because it was a pretty big turn. It does call back to the fact that she's fought a number of other Force sensitives without lightsabers. It's kind of her character, especially where she is now. And there's a lot of analogies here with samurai and how they're able to disarm other samurai, even though they don't have a weapon. It's all the same hand movements for anybody that studies like Aikido and martial arts. Anyways, there is a part of me that feels like he did open himself up deliberately, because he wanted to give her the option. He wanted to put that opportunity in front of her, like be the aggressor, give her the opportunity to feel like she's overcome and overtaken him, and see what she did with it. Because she wasn't going to kill him. He's already, at least in my head, he's already dead. That lightsaber would never have done anything to him, right? But he was just trying to give her the opportunity to be confronted with that decision about, do I go through with this? Do I give in and take the full bait and fully accept death in terms of like falling to the dark side and giving into that, right? Or do I not do that and live? Like take the second chance on life again, become something more, let go of the guilt, let go of all this anger, all the aggression, all this, the weight of this responsibility that she's, unfairly put on her shoulders. Do I get rid of all that and again, transcend, become somebody more? What does he say after that? He says, you still have a chance, right? Do I get it? Or
there's hope. There's hope for you yet.
Right. What do I live for that hope to be better, to be something else? So I think he could have done that. I would agree. I'm not sure where I stand on the red eyes, the yellow eyes thing. I like the ambiguousness of the not really knowing. It's similar to Kenobi. Like, how many times we're still debating about whether or not that was Anakin that said, you didn't kill me, I did, kind of thing, and whether that was really him versus Vader, right? I don't even know where we landed on that. I don't even know anymore. But it's similar to that, right? Where there's a lot to be left to interpretation. So, it turns into Return of the Jedi. Right. Even the way she threw the lightsaber off to the side, it's almost like I want to put those, like, overlap them because she throws it off to the side like, I'll never join you. Right. Similar to what Ahsoka, for what Luke Skywalker says. And she says, I choose to live. He does that little smirk. Oh, well, first off, he when he closed his eyes and put his head down, and then he looked up and gave everybody that $1 million smile with his puppy dog eyes again. Yeah. The lopsided grin. Yeah. The lopsided smirk from Hayden Christensen. I'm sure, like, there was a squeal that was heard around the world at that point, at probably 8:35 p.m. Central, when he made that little smirk there. That was Lauren. But he says, there's hope for you yet. What's that? That was Lauren. Well, I think it was millions of people, honestly, based on what I was seeing. If they would have hugged, it would have been me, man. It's just saying. Yeah. But, she said, I choose to live. He says, there's still hope for you yet. And then he looks up at an angle. Yeah, he was like nodding that something was about to happen, right? Exactly. You started seeing everything around her starting to, like, I don't know, the scenery started to dissolve away, I guess. Yeah. Well, it starts with the thunder and lightning. Like, he looks up like that, looks back up, he looks up, I'm like that. I'm video, you can see what I'm doing. But he looks up and then quickly looks back at her, and the camera's panning. We get he basically disappears the way he reappeared in the way Filoni brought that to us. And then we hear the lightning, the thunder, all of that's kind of crackling around. The music sequence here at this point changes drastically. It
Right.
does feel very rebirthy. I don't know how else to explain it. This is purposeful, right? So the visuals too. I love what he did where we had like the world between worlds kind of collapsing in on itself, right? Giving way to water being, symbolizing rebirth and baptism. By the way, the Patreon show this week. I didn't tell you about that. The Patreon show.
It's my shocked face. Yeah.
Yeah, shocked face. It just reminded me. What did I call it? I called it Ahsoka, the hero's journey. So what I want to do is take the first 5 episodes so far of Ahsoka, and I want to apply the hero's journey so that we can look at it. Okay. This dude is taking it to the letter of the law. Like everything that's supposed to happen.
I'm telling you, man. It's all telegraphed. I mean, when Anakin was talking legacy, I mean, this is a love letter to George Lucas. This whole series is absolutely a love letter to George Lucas.
Yeah, but that is the rebirth of and the baptism. All of this is like right out of Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey and stuff. So I want to dig into that with the Patreon show this weekend, specifically around Ahsoka. But yeah, so then we get the music playing. We get basically she's born again, right? And this is where we cut over now to what was it? I forget who it was that pulled him. Oh, that was what's his name, by the way. It was the guy that was the stunt guy. We were talking about whether or not he had lived. I guess he did live. I don't remember the girl on the
the lady was the one who jumped in the water, and then he pulled her up onto the ramp of the Ghost.
In the ramp, yeah.
Yeah, Brendan Wayne.
That's it, Brendan Wayne. Thank you.
Landon, I think is the character's name.
Okay. Was it John Wayne's son? Grandson. Yeah, that makes more sense. But yeah, so all that was great. The music, I mean, I just freaking loved it. It was like reminiscent of the music from the finale of the Clone Wars, when you see Ahsoka and she drops the lightsabers and that whole sequence. There was parts that were just lifted right out of that. I don't know what he was doing there, but it was just working for me on a lot of different levels. Yeah. When they bring her in, this is like the second, if not the third now at this point, I've already lost count, reference to Empire Strikes Back, where she's laying back and she's saying Anakin. All I thought was father, son, why didn't you tell me, where she's kind of reflecting on everything that happened.
Ben, and same there too.
Yeah,
at the beginning of
exactly.
Empire. Yep.
And then we get the Ghost flying over, overhead. That's a great shot. It's almost like an air show kind of shot where the Ghost and the I think it was 3 X-Wings that were still around kind of fly over. Yeah, everything about this was all, I mean, I don't know, there's not a whole lot here because it's all emotion, it's all a lot of visuals, it's the music, everything they've put together here, honestly.
Yeah, and we really didn't point the music out specifically during all of the Anakin Ahsoka sequences, but they were, again, we mentioned before, they're turning the themes that we know from the Star Wars saga, and they were just doing variations of it. It was just absolutely fantastic. Duel of the Fates was in there. There was Across the Stars was in there as well. There were just countless little homages and leitmotifs in there, and just slight variations on a theme that the Kiners did, and it was just absolutely perfect for these sequences. It fits so well without distracting you of like, oh, it's Duel of the Fates time, like we see in some things, right? So it was really great that it was masked within it, but you still got the same energy and emotion from it, but it was something darker about it as well.
Yeah, you're right. It wasn't very heavy-handed. It was there, but it wasn't forced, I guess.
Yeah, familiar yet unfamiliar, which is always a great place to be, right?
Exactly. And then we get so this is where I feel like he was kind of playing up on the Ahsoka the White in a lot of different ways. The character, when she's presented in Rebels, there is kind of like I'm not gonna say a big halo around her or anything like that, but there's definitely light behind her.
Right.
You think of Gandalf, which is really where this is coming from. You think of the way Gandalf appeared when he came back, definitely was masked with the light behind him, the sun, right, before you got to see his face. And he opens this shot with the light beaming on Ahsoka, right, symbolizing that she's now something new, that she is now the light in some ways. And from there, she's wearing the white Turkish towels and whatever else she was wearing. So again, not necessarily exactly what we saw, but I think all the signs were here that this is definitely a new version of Ahsoka, we got to see her. I mean, she starts smiling through all of this, and she's so lighthearted. And the way she was talking to Hu Yang at the very end there about like, I don't remember what her line was, but when she was outside after she had just talked to the whales or whatever, it was just something about her. And I'd been talking about how I haven't felt like I could get on board with this because I wasn't sure how I was feeling about a Rosario, but I will say that this was the episode. Like, this was the turning point for me. And specifically, everything from this point on feels like it's an extension of the Ashley Eckstein Ahsoka. And all I mean by that is just the spirit of it all. I mean, I get the context. I understand where she was from. I understand that she was kind of going through some stuff. I've talked about that many times in this show, but there was just something now that I'm able to bridge those two together, and I've like reconciled that. So I'm all in. I think that was beautifully done.
And there was much rejoicing.
Yeah, we can all grow, right, at some point. So,
but you're right. This is what the series needed to do, right? This is what needed to happen in order to help us understand why is she so subdued all the time. Why we can see that there's a heavy weight on her. What is it going to take to lift that weight off of her shoulders and to have her embrace all the good things that are around her that she is preventing herself from doing? And again, it was evident right away, right? So when she comes out of the ghost and Jason runs up and gives her a hug, right? And she embraces him and she smiles and she's still very calm, right? She still kind of rebels Ahsoka in that way of, I owe you my life, thank you, my thanks or whatever. So it was still very polished and very formal, I guess, to an extent. But again, you're right. Just the overall demeanor of the character was a huge shift. In the conversations with Hu Yang in particular, right? Especially when they're going into the mouths of the Purrgil, do we know this is going to work? Where are we going? We could go anywhere. I don't really know. And she's almost laughing about it, right? Yeah, but it's better than nowhere. And so it's just a nice summary for, where her character has been and now what she's open to. And she's really embracing life again and opening herself up to the things that matter most, the relationships, right? Appreciating Hu Yang. While she touches his shoulder often throughout the series, the way that she does it this time seems to be a little more meaningful in that way, that she values him, right? The relation, the interaction she has with Hera and with Jason, right? And I imagine it'll be interesting to see when she reconnects with Sabine specifically. Yeah. What does that look like? Does that feel fundamentally different? Which I would anticipate it will.
Yeah, it will. I'm 100% with you. I was thinking about that too. And more, what I'm really more interested is seeing like Sabine's response to that. Like, who the heck are you? Like, what happened to you? Why are you acting this way? She's got a very negative kind of opinion of her. Like, maybe a negative opinion. I don't know what the word is, but there's been some drama there. There's been some confrontation. It's been contentious, and you see that come through in their in the relationship that we see on screen, the way they interact with each other. We can clearly see that. So I would like to see it. And some of that is coming, not that we're getting kind of off topic here, but some of that has been trickled down. So going back to the lessons, right? You got to think that as she was training Sabine, a lot of that was seeping through that training. And she may have been harder on things than she shouldn't have, or, worried that she was just going to pass on all this baggage and all the guilt and the potential to, do evil things that had been passed on to her from Darth Vader. Right. I feel like that was impacting her training. And so Sabine was never really had a good chance. I mean, not to say Ahsoka's not a good trainer, but she was never in the right mental space to really be the trainer, to be the master that Sabine needed, especially as someone who's not force sensitive, that is trying to be force sensitive. Like, it just seems like a huge obstacle that would get in the way of actually really tapping into Sabine's potential, or allowing Sabine to really rise up to her full potential, right? I think she was a blocker in that way. And now that that's been lifted, I think that opens up, I don't think it opens up for Sabine to become a better Jedi, right? Or, maybe more powerful in the Force in some way.
Yeah, I mean, there's been parallels with Ahsoka and Luke Skywalker in the sequel trilogy, and I think they're justified now that we see this, right, of what was Luke unable to overcome, or kind of did it in a little bit different way. But again, he was very concerned about the same things that Ahsoka was struggling with. How do I not pass on all of the crap that went with the Jedi, right? Because it is all of that is within me, and I've lived it in that hubris and everything else. And so you see a direct parallel with that. And she's kind of the Luke of this era in this moment, but she was able to come to a different decision, a little bit earlier and before without all the other dire consequences, at least as far as we know right now. But again, very similar parallels as to why they want to shut down and distance themselves. So again, I'm really curious about where this goes for Ahsoka. And I thought this may have been the series. I thought this may have been the episode where she actually embraces being a Jedi again. I really thought she was close, but I am more convinced than ever that I think when we leave this series, I would not be surprised. I mean, I think it's floating to the top that she will actually re-embrace the culture of the Jedi and the label of being a Jedi, because I think, not that she needs it, and I'm not saying this is a requirement by any stretch, but I think she's leaning more in that direction of being comfortable with who she is, what her past is, and what she can do to shape the future, right? She is training a Jedi. They know that. Why not embrace it totally now that you've finally, shed the gray and you've embraced the white?
Yeah. I don't disagree with that at all. Like, I think that's a great point. Like, her whole mantra of "I am no Jedi," while super cool, kick-ass, and rebellious, and we've always loved it.
Yeah, defiant, right?
The defiance, of it all. I mean, we've always loved all of that, but now in the context of what we've just seen, it changes it for me. Like, it feels like, yeah, I love all that still. Don't get me wrong.
It's no longer in spite, right? I mean,
exactly. Yeah. It's no longer in spite. That's exactly it. It's a different take now, right? So I think she would be okay to coming around and calling herself a Jedi because she's no longer focusing on all that death and destruction, all the negativity that Vader was trying to, or Anakin was trying to say was not part of this. It's, it's all the good, not just the bad, right?
Yeah. Clearly she doesn't teach Luke any of this stuff. So that they're ever going to have a conversation in the future is next to nil at this point. But.
Yeah, they're pretty much shaping the future of Star Wars. Like, we already kind of see where some of this stuff is going to go, and it's not looking good for Luke there.
Right.
So he will have his moment. Don't get wrong, or don't get too sad. He will have his moment at some point. So the other thing that take away here is that we talked a lot about time jump and whether or not we were going to get it, or we speculated. Yeah, I guess we did. I mean, it was like he said one cycle. So it's been a day.
Been a day. Yeah.
So not a big deal. I just want to kind of point that out since we maybe not made a big deal about it in the last.
Well, a couple days. She was asleep for about a day. So the whole event we saw was probably 2 days at most, probably. Yeah. Maybe that was the course of a day when they went down to the planet. So not very long.
Yep. No, for sure. So yeah, you kind of segued into, her coming back out, hugging Jason. He talked about the lightsabers and how she could hear them, or how he could hear them, which I think was like, I just wonder if she's going to follow up with him at some point. Like, whoa, kid, we need to have a talk if you were hearing that, because you have no idea where I was.
Absolutely.
I'm going to blow your mind here. And then
crazy dream sequence. Just saying. Yeah.
Shut up. Okay, the other part that I really liked was just that, again, more levity here, was the whole, you have a training room in your starship? Will you train me? No. You know how to build a lightsaber? Yes. Will you teach me? No. Like, he was spamming the button. I don't have my button turned on right now, but it was there we go.
No.
There we go. Thank you very much.
A little louder than I wanted to. Sorry about that.
IG-11 no and yeses that were coming out of Huyang there at the very end. But I love that whole part of it. So, and then the whole question about where is Sabine coming from Hera. Psychometry is not something I remember Ahsoka ever using, but now it makes sense because I think we saw her do something similar at the very beginning, maybe with the map. But here's what I would say. I just wonder if he's not kind of signaling, telegraphing, setting us up for, now that she has become a different person, Ahsoka the White, whoever that is, maybe she's more in touch with Force abilities that she typically was never really that great at, right? She's got to be at another level, I would think, at some point, maybe not even more than mentally and spiritually, but I feel like somebody like this character, this archetype, would be now more in tune and have the ability to do things at a greater level than she had before. And so that's how I'm kind of writing this off. Although, like, again, she already kind of had it at the beginning, but I just don't remember ever her using psychometry, similar to like Quinlan Vos in the past.
Well, and was it through I guess the question was it through the actual device? She was looking for impressions around everything.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean,
I took it as psychometry, but maybe I'll need to go back and watch it again. But
I'm with you. I mean, I see why that is. It'd be interesting.
She heard the voices, right? She heard the whole conversation happening. How would she hear that?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's typically how psychometry has been explained to us. So that would presumably be the case. Although we thought that was more limited to, I don't know if it was just to Kifars like Quinlan Vos, or if Quinlan's kind of been the exception to the rule. We've not really seen any others, maybe one other. And I think it's maybe just by name drop or by ability drop. We haven't actually seen it on a page or on screen, in particular. But I think regardless, though, I think she's open and she's listening now better. Not to sound like a broken record with Kanan, but she's actually listening now, and she's able to take these moments and say, okay, there are ways that we can do this. Let me see if I can try to do that. And again, exploring maybe things that she believes are possible, but maybe hasn't manifested, or maybe manifest is not the right word, but she's not tried these types of things before, and she's not challenged herself in order to extend, or maybe she has and we've just not seen it. But
right, that's possible.
But I mean, it makes sense though. I mean, that there would be a really strong presence in the Force. Now that she heard the lines line for line was a little bit on the nose. I stepping back as a viewer, I didn't necessarily want or need all of the exact rehashing of all of that. They probably could have truncated that a little bit and still got the point across without doing it all, although expertly delivered, of course. But, but again, it got the point across to where she's like, okay, she's with them, right? She is alive, I think, but she's definitely with them. And, so we need to find a way to figure that out. Of course, then she looks up and has an epiphany moment.
Yeah, well, I think from a storytelling standpoint, it reaffirms Ahsoka's doubt at the beginning, like in episode 4. I think it was 4, where she had questioned Sabine on twice about whether or not she could trust her and that loyalty. Yeah, and so I think it reaffirms that, right, for her. Maybe it was important for the audience. I don't know so much. I'm with you. Like, I don't know if they had to go through all of that, but I mean, she could have easily picked that up, closed her eyes, and then just said, "Oh, they're she's with Balin," or they took off and they went to another planet. And I think we would all probably been okay with that. But it was interesting that they ran through that whole thing, and so then it got me thinking, okay, well, is she now like have some kind of amplified force power? And here's where I'm going with this, and there's a reason why. Like Dave Filoni, there's a reason. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to credit myself as Dave Filoni, but there's a reason why. If she did have psychometry, and her, let's just say for the sake of argument, and because she is now this new, more powerful Jedi archetype, and I think she could have got more from touching that object than what we saw. Like, what if she came back in the next episode and she uses something that she picked up from Balin, or maybe from Morgan Elsbeth, or whoever the heck was holding this thing? She may have other memories and things that she could use later on in some of these future episodes. And again, I'm probably looking way too much into it, but I find it very curious that they did play that whole sequence, and they had played the sequence as part of the here's what you missed in the last episode part of this episode, right? So they did it twice. I don't know. Conspiracy theories, sure. Tinfoil hat theories, probably. It's probably not going to amount to anything. I did like the fact that at least it ended on the do it for Ezra, getting to hear that. So she knows where, he is, and it sets us up for the next part here.
And again, I think there was a bit of, there may have been a hint of disappointment, but also resigned of like, it makes sense. This is what's important to Sabine, and accepting, who she is and who Sabine is in that regard. And again, having a more focus of, it's less about, I don't know about if you got this feeling, it's less about Thrawn now, and it's definitely more about Sabine.
Yes.
Right. And Ezra by extension. And it really did, while it wasn't necessarily overtly stated, there is definitely a shift. We are the only time Thrawn gets brought up is really between Hera and Mon Mothma, right? So it's very much about Sabine now for Ahsoka, which I think is a really important unspoken redirect for the character, which I think is monumental for the character, and really, really important moment of a kind of difference here.
I think you got something wrong, and
that's not uncommon. Yeah.
No, and I mean that in all sincerity and love. I think you were about to say there is a shift, and you walk that back and said you feel like it, whatever. I think you're right. I think there is a shift, and I think it is overt. And a little bit later,
I'm wrong by being right.
You're wrong by being right, Jonesy. Congratulations. I'll get to that here at the very end, because I think you're 100% spot on. I think for her, it is no longer about Thrawn. It is 100% about Sabine. So
we'll see how well that sticks by the end of this, but I think in this moment, absolutely, yeah.
Well, you said both, so you're right either way, I guess, depending on how this turns out. So good luck. Okay, so when she says that she's alive and she turns to Hera, you could see Hera's eyes light up, right? My daughter's alive, basically, is what happened there. I love that expression from Hera. And then she says, of course, afraid it's not that simple, and then they mentioned the whole fleet coming in, Chopper with his little uh-oh kind of thing. That was great. She's staring at the helmet, and then finally she hears the Purrgil. And my God, we called this back when the series was like, when we saw the teaser, we said, when we were speculating, okay, if she's going to get Ezra, we said it was going to come down to like one of two options back then. And I said, the one option we want is for her to actually talk to the whales and say, take me to Ezra. And then I think we got essentially what we did, maybe not in that sequence, because at the very end, she's like, I don't know, let's just see where we're going to go, which is totally different. I got more on that here in just a second. But I love the fact that this was the route they ended up going. For me, it was like the most natural. It was the most fitting. It was the most poetic way to go about and find.
It was
Ezra.
really the only way to really do it, right?
That's true. It is. Well, I mean, they introduced the map, and then right.
Well,
probably
they gave another path for the people who weren't going to use the Purrgil, but I think for our heroes,
this was the only way. Like if they'd done anything else, I would have rioted. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And you kind of called like how they would do it in a way. I know you were just quoting Joseph Campbell in the Patreon show with the belly of the whale. It was the mouth of the whale, but really it was, while it wasn't necessarily the rebirth part because we already had that, but it was definitely lifted right. They're very joined in that way and very, very directly related.
Yeah, I was kind of half joking, but then I thought that would be cool. Like that would make sense because I was thinking
as soon as you said, I was like, I don't know if they'll go all the way in the belly, but I could definitely see that this would be a thing because I really thought they were going to Silver Surfer this thing, but
it was going to be one of two ways. Like it was going to either be they go into the whale or the whale just kind of latched onto them and, got out of Dodge kind of thing. So
that's kind of what I thought it was going to be, more like a Rebels thing where they kind of wrapped around the ship and they, zoomed out there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, when that wasn't the case, that was I'm okay with how it went though. I mean, in the mouth is interesting. So. And it makes sense. They would be more protected. It kind of makes more sense in that way than maybe how Ezra and Thrawn got out there.
Yeah. There was we had that quick scene. I love that they mentioned, I think Carson Teva mentions, Organa as being somebody that was kind of sticking their neck out for them.
Senator Organa, yeah.
Yep. And then later on we saw Mon Mothma. I didn't think we would see her again. We did, but a little hologram Mon Mothma. So that was cool. She's still part of it.
But we were kind of right because we thought that Leia would have a bit of a name drop, and so this is kind of a masked cameo name drop of sorts. So
yes,
really really cool that she did slip in there, and it makes so much sense that she would be the one helping fly cover for these people as well because they are kind of rebels from the old school and things like that. So I love that she was the one flying cover for them. I thought that was a perfect way to do it. We don't have to touch the character again for the rest of the series. Super effective the way they did it. Perfect way of doing it.
Yeah, it's once a rebel, always a rebel, right? That's Leia. She's gonna ride or die, man, until the very end. So whatever she's got to do to help the other rebels, she's gonna do it. So I think, but I mean, it only goes so far, and that was the whole point, right? The rebel fleet they were sending out ships to bring them back, right? I forget. I follow the guy that designed that ship. It's a new design for the Republic transport fleets or ships or whatever they are. I forget what he called them, but. That guy's great. I forget his name. He's on Twitter. He does amazing artwork. He's got all kinds of other stuff that he's been posting that didn't make it in. So hopefully they keep him on and we get to see more of his artwork. I just want to throw that out there. I'm terrible. I would have given him a shout out, but I don't remember his name.
And Dante had a comment in the chat. I was sort of hoping the group of whales would grab the whole fleet of ships. I almost expected this to happen too. And
wouldn't that be that's a great idea.
The battle happening outside of our galaxy and not necessarily coming back would have been very much a real scenario. To where the rest of our series is more or less out there until we come home. That would have been an interesting way. Now I'm almost more convinced than ever that when we come back, we'll have something with the Empire rebuilding the remnant. So we'll be interesting to see with the next couple of episodes. But I was very much in the same way of Dante here, thinking that, all right, we've got a small fleet, nothing crazy, but enough to where we could see where this takes us. But no dice this time around. Yeah. That's all right. This keeps it personal, I think, which is also important. I think is the point of the series. While there are big stakes, it's very much a personal story for these characters as well, which I think is important for us, coming from Rebels in particular, but also just seeing what we saw in this episode. We finally got over that hump with Ahsoka. I think you were sharing your own personal journey. So let's keep that going now and see where it takes us.
Yep. In fact, I'm wearing the Ahsoka sweater. I don't think I talked about it, but... DisneyStore.com. No, I don't get anything from it.
You were the only Texan wearing a sweater right now, but yeah, it's a good looking sweater.
Dude, it got down to like 90, 98 today. I don't know what you're talking about. Cold front came through. It's sweater time. Okay, so she says that she knows where Sabine's at. She's lying, right? I think they confirmed that at the very end, which I thought was kind of cool.
Wait, what?
She says, I know where Sabine's at. She doesn't. She clearly doesn't, because she tells Hu Yang, like, I don't know. Maybe they're going to take us there.
She knows.
It's a
she
leap
knows
of faith.
She knows she's with Skull in them, I think is how I interpreted that. So she's on whatever the end of that map was. But again,
she said, no, she says, I know how to follow Sabine is what she says.
Okay.
That is not true. That is a false statement. But I love that she did it, though, because I think the Ahsoka prior to this would have taken a different approach.
Well, no, she does know how to follow her, though, to an extent, because remember Hu Yang's comment before when they first mentioned this.
All right,
the Star Whales.
You're playing from a certain point of view card.
No, I'm playing. Here's what he said. Card.
Okay, go ahead.
He said when he was talking about the Star Whales, yeah, there was a theory that that they were the original hyperspace lanes and things were plotted along the course of these star whales called Purrgil, that could jump through, jump through hyperspace and presumably through galaxies. So she's applying that logic to be able to say, okay, well, we're seeing all this other evidence, right? So why wouldn't that be the case? And if there were anything that's how Ezra got out there, why would this not be the same type of thing? And if this point here was so important for the map, and there's just conveniently Purrgil here, all these things line up a little too well for this not to be possible in that way. Is it fact? Is she guaranteed? No, absolutely not. I'm with you there. But there were enough signs of saying, seems reasonable, let's give it a shot, and saying, well, I think I know how to follow her.
I took it as she was lying to stall, like to maybe hopefully they'd be like, oh, okay, never mind, we'll stand down kind of thing. But I get your point. I don't believe you, and you're starting to sound like a separatist. Okay, let's get to the final sequence of the Purrgil, because this is where I turn into a big ball of mush. This whole last 10 minutes, my goodness, I'm such a baby. The music's playing, I've got tears run. The whales are out. I'm like, oh, look at them, they're so beautiful, and all their flappy tentacles and little flaps on the side and whatever else they've got. I just loved everything about it. The music from here on out, like I said, that last 10, 15 minutes, it's just
really good.
It's inspirational. I don't know. That's probably the best word I can think of. Hopeful, right? And I think that's the whole point of this.
Has any of the music come out on, any of the?
They've released the main theme, but that's it. And I know
right?
they are planning on releasing the soundtrack. So I think they're.
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised, honestly, now that we're this many episodes in and we've gotten to this point.
Usually
I'd be surprised if we don't get a couple more
yeah.
tracks here in the next week or two.
Yeah, I would think usually they kind of slow roll these throughout.
Yes. Yep. And we haven't gotten anything, so they've kind of stuck to their guns on that first one. But yeah, my goodness, I can't wait to get this whole soundtrack. But yeah, the whole Purrgil thing, the music, the whole sequence. The big guy shows up. We get another reference, I think, from Empire Strikes Back, where she says, "Yeah, that'll do." She says, "Yeah, that'll do." You think of Han Solo on the asteroid when they're in the asteroid field, and he says, "Yeah, that'll do nicely," right?
And they're going into the mouth of a creature, right?
And they're going into the mouth of a creature, right? So call back to Empire Strikes Back. There's a lot of smiling out here. She walks out onto the ship. Everything's super bright. Everything's super white. And then we get the fleet show up, and this is where we get the comic, the levity of Carson trying to explain and stall them. I mean, they task him with don't let them show up, and he's one guy in an X-wing, and he starts trying to play his card of hey, I'm from this other whatever, I forget where he's from, and they're
Delphi, yeah.
Delphi, and they're like, dude, that you have no jurisdiction here. What are you even trying to say? Sorry, what were you gonna say? I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just saying, a long way from home.
Yeah, a long way from home. And he's like, please identify yourself. I mean, he's doing everything he can to stall, and none of this makes sense. And he's putting his neck on the line. They threaten him to remove his rank, right, if he doesn't tell him where Ahsoka is. And he finally gives in. He talks about being on a mission, and he says, mission, the reason we're here is because you have no mission. He's like, I respectfully disagree.
That was the perfect response. Yeah.
That was the perfect response. So, so they're threatening to strip him for insubordination. He's finally gives in. He's like, okay, but you're not going to believe me. And this is where, again, so there's these space whales. I just feel like every conversation starts with that line. And then we get the Beast Affinity, which is something that Ahsoka has done before. I mean, we think back to Tales of the Jedi. She befriended that whatever it was, the big tiger.
Yeah, the
saber-tooth tiger thing, right? Yeah. So she's done it before, and she did it at a very, very young age. So well within her power to do.
Right.
But similar to with Ezra, Again, more of that music that was kind of coming up here, the way she was communing. And then when she comes back to the window again, she's like super happy and super bright. I was fully I was fully expecting to be like rapping on the window going, "Get in, loser. We're about to go get Ezra and Sabine," you know?
Right.
And then Hu Yang is like freaking out because she's out there, and you know, it was that whole sequence was really great. The music is crescendoing at this point. Then you start hearing the whale starting to power up, and I'm like, oh my God, this is just the finale for Rebels all over again. I'm like bawling at this point because I'm thinking it's, you know, we're gonna get the same emotion. And I'm looking at the time as I'm watching this thinking, God, please don't end on this, because I know he's gonna end on with them zapping into space. It's gonna go to black. I'm gonna get the titles, and it's gonna be a long ass week. But I do want to talk about just those last lines of this, right? Where you know, she talked about, you certain, you know, where Sabine is taken, and she says, I have no idea. And he's like, what? She goes, no idea. We'll just see where it goes. And what came to mind was, it's Ahsoka almost like a wayfinder, right? Like truly following the cosmic force, wherever should it take her now. She's just there's something liberating about that. And I think this is where the first sign is that she's refocusing now on not so much of the war that is still imminent. I don't think she's losing sight of that, but it's now really truly about rescuing her Padawan, right? She wants to go after her apprentice now, and that's what the mission is. It is no longer about Thrawn. It's second now in all of this.
Yeah, it reminds me of Qui-Gon telling Anakin, follow your instincts, right? Trust your instincts. Like, just feel, right? Don't think, feel, and just reach out and see what feels right in the moment. And that's exactly what she's doing. She's taking calculated risks, I think. There's a reasonable, maybe not guarantee, but there's a reasonable path forward here that she will get to the place that she wants to go. This feels right. There's so many other things at play. And I won't call it will of the Force or anything, but the Force is speaking to me in a certain way, as Ahsoka, saying that this is the right path that feels right. Let's try. What do we have to lose at this point? It's all time, right? But you know, what do we have to lose at this point? This is our best bet, our best way forward. It's what Ezra did. Ezra showed me the way in some kind of way, right? And so they take this path forward, and then this leap of faith makes a lot of sense. And I think, again, go back to Joseph Campbell, when you talk about when they're inside the Purgil's mouth, part of what the belly of the whale is you're immersed in darkness, and then you are illuminated with bright light. And that's exactly what we get, right? The mouth closes, they're in darkness, and then when the hyperspace comes out, you get the really bright light.
Yeah.
So again, you still get the parallels with some of the hero's journey, you know, details in kind of the fifth part of the hero's journey, which of course is episode 5. So that lines up really well. So
yep, it sure does. Just to kind of round out that sequence with Hu Yang there, he says it could go anywhere, and she says, I know, but that's better than going nowhere.
I love that line. Yeah.
I do too. And there's honestly, this is where a lot of people, like some of the criticism, and they're from like, unfortunately, they're from like really snobby people that are potential writers or wannabe writers. And it's like, that's cool, but you know what? You're not writing Star Wars, and so you don't get to really say anything about it. You can, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. Anyways, it is kind of cliche. It is kind of corny, but it directly goes back to what Sabine was talking about, and how she's just kind of been living, and you know, and she really was going nowhere up until this point. She was going nowhere. She was just spinning and churning over and over again in the same old, you know, what I would say monolithic kind of life. And now she's got new life. She's got a new lease on life. She's been reborn. And so wherever it takes her is fine with her. She's going somewhere. She's moving forward. She's progressing. She's continuing on that transcendence that started with, you know, that whole dream sequence, or the lesson that was learned from Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah, and I love the lines from Hera too, when Ahsoka says, hey, you're not gonna be able to make this journey with us. And I love the response, well, Jason's too young to travel between galaxies anyway.
Right. As though that's an option too.
Perfect mom quote, you know, but also like, Mom.
Yep. Oh, that music too, by the way, at this point, with all, and then the whales are like, you know, moving through the fleet, and you can see everybody's wonderment. They kind of cut to every single one of the X-Wing pilots as well. You can see their expressions. We talked about Teva's, all that was great. And then here's where it all kind of came from me. Like, it just hit so hard and just is perfect in my opinion. You know, she says, looks like they're about to jump. You said that, not, it's all right, whatever. And then Ahsoka says, Hera, I'll find them. Like, that is conviction. Right. She says, Hera, I'll find them. I promise. That is right out of Empire Strikes Back. Yet again, Princess, we'll find them. We'll find Han. I promise. This is what Lando says to Princess Leia when they're going out to go look for Han Solo. But the fact that she says it with such conviction, go back and listen to it. She says, Hera, I'll find them. I promise. And then we get another, like, it just, Hera says, may the force be with you. In Empire Strikes Back, it's Luke Skywalker who ends that with may the force be with you. So, and then it's just the ending of Empire Strikes Back. So
Right.
I love the fact that we ended on that. So like you said earlier, you did a really good job of, I forget what you said, but you said something along the lines of.
It was great, though. It was fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Super
great.
memorable.
It's positive, but we're still not there. You know
Right,
what I mean?
yeah.
Like it's not all rosy. There's a lot of unknowns here. There's still a lot of danger and a lot of, there's a lot of anxiety from the characters about what's going to happen. What are they going to get to? What state is everybody going to be in? But there's hope. And I think that's how Empire ends. And I think that's exactly how this episode ended. There was definitely a sense of hope there.
Right, which means the bottom's about to fall out, right? Because that's usually what happens. But I'm with you, though. And again, for a show that was very, I don't want to say it was dark, but it was very somber, right? It was very gray, I guess you could call it, right? It was very subdued in a lot of behaviors, I think, in Ahsoka specifically, the tension that was there between the characters, the constant battling of their own ego and their own baggage. And when we get to the end of this episode, that is lifted, and everything just feels brighter and new and a new beginning, and we're able to now make that next step forward and see what comes next. It might be something really great. It might be the bottom falls out, but as of this moment, we've learned what we need to learn. We have a new lease on life, and we're able to make this jump forward, literally through space and time, through a portal. But it's going to be something new for us, and we're ready for it. Right? We've learned what we need to learn. We're ready. We're embracing all the things at our disposal, so we can do something about this threat, but also, really first and foremost, finding our friends and bringing our family home.
Okay. I've got 3 questions. We're going to do quick fire rounds. Not a whole lot of explanation, I don't want you to elaborate too much. Are we going to see Anakin again in this series?
If we didn't have the quotes from the trailer, I would say no, we wouldn't see him again. But now that we know we still have and again, we know they do this for the trailers where they say they have stuff and they just cut them. They're just for the trailer. So I will go out on a limb and say no, even though we have it, just because I'm kind of curious. But granted, the real reason is probably a yes. We probably will. What about you?
I'm going to say no. As much as I would love to, I think he did what he needed to do.
Exactly.
Right?
He served his purpose. Why do you
serve his purpose?
Yeah, you don't have to belabor it now. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know that's probably the unpopular opinion, but I think that's probably the reality. Second question.
That doesn't mean we don't love Hayden Christensen or love Anakin in the show, but do I want him or do I need him now? Is he likely to come back? Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, give me give me the last 2 episodes with just Ahsoka and Anakin. I'll be okay. Even if it doesn't make sense and you can just toss Sabine and Ezra to the side. No, I'm kidding. That's not true. But I'm fine. I get it. Hera and Jason, are we going to see them before or again in the series? Oh, I think we kind of already talked about it, but just
I think we definitely will. Yep.
Yeah, I think you talked me into it. I think you're right. I think they come back, we have a battle, they're a part of that. That kind of reaffirms that they're there, right? And it's so yeah, I'm with you. I'm gonna agree there. And then lastly, I asked you this question. I don't think you answered it, but it's fine. Who trains Jason?
Yeah, I think I want it to be Ezra.
But who trains him?
Who trains Jason? Ezra.
Yeah, who versus who do you who does it versus who do you want to do it?
Oh, well,
it could be the same. That's fine.
I still think it makes sense and it's poetic for it to be Ezra. So I'll just go that route. I mean, there's a case for Sabine to do it as well. But again, I think she's still way too early in her journey for that to make any sense. So I would just go with Ezra. Yeah,
I'm with you too. Like, I don't think Sabine would do it, although it would, like you said, the legacy, right, to kind of play into some of the themes that were in this one makes sense. But in my head, there's no doubt it's going to have to be Ezra. And that is what I want to see. I want to see that relationship, and I want to see those conversations and talking about what Dad was like. And I mean, that's just, that'll melt my heart in a lot of ways. So I know you're going to give some shout outs. I do want to call one person out, Matty the Mank. He's the only Manchester United fan that I know and actually like. He's on Twitter. I told him I would call it. He had mentioned the music. He said, Hera and Jason scene was perfect on the show. Please note that the music when Jason and Hera are listening to the waves, peak Star Wars soundtrack for me. I think we kind of talked about it, but yeah, he's right. That whole sequence there with the music and the way everything was shot. I forgot to mention too, just quickly, that the way Filoni shot that, he was pulling back with the camera while they were standing there and their backs were to us when they were listening. And when that music is playing in that moment, it's like pretty special Star Wars for me. So I agree with him 100%, even though he's a Manchester United fan.
Yeah, the sound design, I think, in this series in general has been exceptional. And I think, yeah, definitely the moments you were talking about throughout that sequence where the lightsabers were blending with the waves crashing, and it was a little difficult to hear them at first, and then they blended. And some of the other sounds we've had in the other episodes, too. I think sound design on the show is absolutely spectacular. So
Absolutely.
definitely on board. Definitely on board with that.
All right.
All right, shout outs, yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of great people out in the live stream, cantinacast.com/YouTube. If you're listening to this, we'd love to have you come out, join in the chat, interact with the other listeners out there, get your comments up on screen. We like to read them out as we come through. I know we have a lot of them out there that don't make it on the screen. We try to get as many of you up there as possible, especially how they fit the conversation. So if you're listening and you think you're missing out, you kind of are. So we'd like for you to come out and join this, like Stephanie, Music Train, Alexander, Ronald, Jack, Sky, JJ Skywalker, Alex, Wrist, Danny, Jennifer, Jeff, Qui-Gon J, 80s Kid from the 90s, Smith Sunflower, Hard Counter, Cube Dude, Jorge, Ben, Gary. If I missed anyone, my sincerest apologies. It is not intentional, but we'd love for you to come out. CantinaCast.com/YouTube.
Yeah. And there were a bazillion people, more than that, online. So thank you guys for
More than a bazillion. Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have broken the YouTube.
And thanks for sticking around. Like, I mean, there's still a ton of people that have stuck around for the full 2 hours and 15 minutes now that we've gone through with this. And so thank you guys. It's very humbling. And I know some of you may be asleep, and that's fine too. I get it. But, I'd like to think that you all are awake and still paying attention. So again, thank you so much for joining for this show. Programming note, as we said earlier, we'll be back on Sunday with our Patreon shows. We'll back on Sunday with the Way Station. So there are some new stuff that we're going to cover.
We said that last week too, and that didn't happen.
I know, but this time we are, because I got a host lined up for that. So Way Station will be Sunday, and then we'll do the Patreon show, which will do Ahsoka, Hero's Journey, and we'll just kind of talk about Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey, and how Dave Filoni has pretty much line by line to the T taken everything in the hero's journey and applied it into the first 6 episodes so far. And I would expect that the first 5 episodes, the last 3 episodes are going to still continue to follow that all the way to the very end. So maybe we'll speculate on what that would look like.
Yeah, we can call the Patreon episode Ahsoka, a Hero's Journey, a love letter to George Lucas and Joseph Campbell.
Okay. You fit that on a title card with all that text.
I'll just put the text. There's no visual at all to that. So just a big block of text.
Yeah. Gary says, this is the best Star Wars chat there is. Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
We appreciate it. That means a lot to us.
Yeah. All right. We'll leave it there, guys, and we'll see you guys here on Sunday.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.